So good morning, everyone. It is 9:32. I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for May 12th, 2020. Before we, well, I will call us to agenda item 2, approval of agenda, but before we commence on that, I wish to raise a point of order with a motion. So I will relinquish the chair temporarily to the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Wilson, and present, as I say, a notice of motion based on what I perceive to be a point of order. It has been brought to my attention that items on the agenda which are for approval, and I confirm that Council has full authority to approve its own agenda. However, some of the items on the agenda are a reflection of the exercise of discretion by administration, and our procedural rules provide that discretion to administration, particularly with respect to communication that Council receives and presentations that get put onto the agenda. And so there are some technical issues with respect to some of the matters. Administration has chosen to exercise its discretion to put the requests on the agenda, recognizing that Council is the ultimate determiner of what actually gets approved on the agenda. With respect to the letters and communications, there is a very technical provision in our procedural bylaw that requires that electronic communication must contain the name of the writer and both the mailing and the electronic address of the writer. I think in many respects, the correspondence that we have received, although it identifies the writer, and of course it came by email, so there is an electronic address, is probably technically missing the mailing address, and that is a slight problem. With respect to presentations, there is under section 14.1.2 of our procedural bylaw a requirement of 2 weeks notice. The reality is that we have switched to a weekly rotation of meetings, but we have addressed the question of 2 weeks notice. As I say, Council is entitled to take full control of its own proceedings. And we also have in our procedural bylaw section 3.4, which provides that in the absence of statutory obligations, and I can find no statutory obligation in this regard. So in the absence of statutory obligations, Council may waive all or part of the provisions of this bylaw for a meeting if the councillors present vote unanimously to do so. A motion to temporarily alter or suspend any provision of this bylaw is not amendable or debatable. So the motion that I wish to make, and again, not to in any way limit Council's ability to decide for itself what will or will not be on our agenda, but simply to relieve the technical constraints that are imposed by those sections. My motion, and again, I repeat, it must be unanimous, and it's not open to amendment or debate. But my motion, Mr. Deputy Mayor, is that pursuant to section 3.4 of the procedural bylaw number 190, Council waive or suspend for the purposes of this regular meeting of May 12th, 2020, section 13.1.1.2, section 13.3, and section 14.1.1 of procedural bylaw 190. Again, an attempt on a point of order to relieve us of the burden of having technical incompliance with our rules for matters which appear on the agenda, but the agenda has not yet been approved.
Okay, so without trying to get all your words right. Do all councillors understand His Worship's motion? Maybe a nod of heads, and then I'll go with questions. Or do we need him to repeat the motion?
Can he repeat the motion?
He can.
Certainly, and I don't know whether councillors have the capacity to get the procedural bylaw up in front of them. It's on the website, of course. I can.
I was a little confused because you made reference to section 14 and then you mentioned 13, the points in section 13. So that's why I was raising my hand. I wanted clarification on that.
So I'm happy to deal with the point. So section 13 and 14 both appear to be relevant. Section 13 deals with letters and communications received from the public. Section 13.1.1.2 says for electronic communication, this is stuff that comes to council, must contain the name of the writer and both the mailing and electronic address of the writer. I think some of the correspondence that we have received, the electronic communication, fails to meet that rather exacting standard because it does not necessarily have mailing addresses on it. So I am proposing in my motion that that section for purposes of today's meeting be waived. I've also proposed with respect to section 13.3, which is to me quite confusing. It provides that on receipt of communication, the Chief Administrative Officer may do various things. And then it says in section 13.3, once decided, and it doesn't say decided by whom, whether that references the CAO or council, no communication on substantively the same matter can be considered for at least 6 months. I struggle with what the intent of that is, but it certainly appears to me to be problematic in these circumstances. And then finally, with respect to appearances or presentations at council meetings, I reference section 14.1.1 of our procedural bylaw. It says a person who wishes to address council must inform the administration in writing or email at least 2 weeks before the proposed presentation. And again, I think that has not been met in these circumstances. But then again, we have changed our procedure so we don't go on a 2-week rotation. And then finally, I reference section 3.4, which is the section which allows council to waive or suspend any part of our rules. And so under that section, I'm proposing that a motion that we simply suspend those sections, 13.1.1.2, section 13.3, and section 14.1.1 for purposes of this meeting only. At some point, I think we should come back and look at our procedural bylaw if we're going to continue with Zoom meetings and a one meeting, or pardon me, a 1 week rotation. But for purposes of today, I am simply suggesting that we relieve ourselves of those strict obligations. That doesn't mean that it presupposes anything on the agenda. We still have the ability on the merits to decide what is on our agenda, but we would not be bound by the strict constraints of that technical language.
Rico? Oh, sorry.
That's fine. Just for clarification on your motion, when you're making reference to section 3 of our policy or procedures, with waiving the rules for our agenda, is that for the entire agenda or for just presentations? So I'm not too clear on that.
I'm understanding that it's the for presentations, but also for letters that have been submitted that may or may not have all the proper address, email, etc.
Okay.
Any question? Motion? I'll call the question. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. I would like to relinquish the chair and welcome His Worship back to where he belongs. You're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, for that, and thank you for reminding me to unmute before I begin addressing. So with that matter out of the way, I turn to approval of the agenda. We have before us today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other alterations required to be made to today's agenda? Councillor Wilson.
Just like to speak briefly to the agenda. I don't think that we need to change anything, but unfortunately, as it is, correspondence to council to have letters at the agenda needs to be by Friday. So past Friday. I just wanted to recognize that throughout the weekend there were a fair amount more letters written to council, and they will be on the agenda next week. But I did want to recognize that these letters, well, first off, I'd like to thank the community for voicing their opinion. Just suggestion that there were 10 letters that are not on the agenda. Those 9 of those would have been against the budget reductions, and one of them was for the budget reduction. So we've got a total of, I think, 27 or 28 letters with a ratio of 27-1. Again, want to thank the public for voicing their opinion. I just wish that we could engage them more often to this extent through during other council meetings and decisions we're making throughout the years. Back to you, Richard.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Council, again, I would call for any proposed alterations to today's agenda. Mr. Furcho, is there anything that administration wishes to bring forward?
Nothing beyond what's on the agenda, unless Kayla or Christine have something that's come up.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you. I'd like to add what probably should be item 13, moving adjournment to number 14. I would ask for a very short in-camera session at the end of this meeting for purposes of discussing human resources. The councillors who have already been tasked with long meetings, I promise it will be very short.
I appreciate the promise, Councillor Butler, but I won't hold you to it because you won't be in control of it. But thank you for that.
I promise that the item I wish to bring forward will be short. Discussion of that item, as you point out, I can't control.
Yes. Thank you. And just as a technical matter, Mr. Furcho, you are able to accommodate an in-camera item and then allow us to return to open session to adjourn?
That's correct. And it's on the website as well for anybody that wants to rejoin the meeting to see the post in camera. And Kayla, did you want to, Councillor Wilson, did you add the letters that have come in since? Was that what happened, or do we need to address that? The letters that
I didn't add them. I'm okay with letting them stand on the following agenda, although I just wanted to recognize them because they are, well, really, they're sent in respects to motion that's will be voted upon today. So I just wanted to let the individuals who wrote letters know that their letters did not go unread. Council did receive them throughout and had thank you for taking part.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I have then a motion from Councillor Butler to add an in-camera human resources item to be identified as item 13 on our agenda and to renumber adjournment to item number 14. And I can't remember the relevant section number, but that in-camera meeting would be pursuant to, I think, section 24 of the applicable legislation. So that is your motion, Councillor Butler?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Councillor Keller-Hrampe? Now you are muted.
I just want to advise council that at 1:45 today, I will be leaving the meeting. I have a doctor's appointment. Unfortunately, I cannot.
Okay. If I could
We'll only
promise.
be a quarter of the way through.
All right, I'm back to posing the question, that is to add this one item to the agenda. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And could I have a motion then, please, to approve today's agenda with that amendment? Councillor Demota, thank you. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you very much. The minutes of the regular meeting of May 12th have, or pardon me, of May 5th have been circulated. Are there any errors, omissions, or required? Any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Councillor McGrath.
Mayor Ireland, I have a question regarding process. It's desired by me to offer a friendly amendment to the motion to reduce the tax burden to the community. And with Councillor Butler as the mover of that motion's permission, I would like to offer a friendly amendment. Where would you suggest I place this in our conversations today?
That is part of the motion that is identified in section 8.1 with respect to the motion to rescind, is it? Yeah. Well, that's a challenging question. Thank you for that. I would think, well, that motion will be before us, and I would suppose that at that time you might make a motion to amend. It's not the motion to rescind that is to be amended, though. It's the previous motion. That falls under, I think it's under section 2 of our bylaw, 11.14. You can introduce a motion calling on council to rescind or amend a previous motion. 11.14 requires that you set out notice in writing of special circumstances, but 11.15 provides that in emergent situations where notice is not practical, you can make a motion to rescind or amend with 2/3 vote of council. So I would suggest that it would be in order for you to make that motion, although I think that we should probably first amend the approval of the agenda. Councillor Demota made that motion, so if that would be a friendly amendment to that motion, we could add as an item under request for decision, say 8.3, a motion to amend the previous motion. But it should be on the agenda first. And we have just approved the agenda, but we could go back and either rescind and revote, or pardon me, reconsider that motion. But Councillor Demota, if you're prepared to accept as a friendly amendment that we add an agenda item under item 8 for Councillor McGrath's intended motion, I will put that back to council.
You're more of an expert than me in these situations, but in order to address the motion that was already passed, in which I think this is referring to, wouldn't the process wouldn't we have to rescind that motion first?
No.
No, I guess not. Okay. Yeah, I'm in favor of doing that, but if that's if the rest of council's willing to.
So the proposed friendly amendment is to approve the agenda subject to the amendment proposed by Councillor Butler and subject to an amendment proposed by Councillor McGrath to add an intended motion as, let's say, item 8.3 of our agenda. Everybody got that figured out where I'm trying to go with this? Nope, Councillor Junot, you're shaking your head. So we have approved the agenda by recent motion, and Councillor McGrath has then indicated that in fact she would like to add something to the agenda that we just approved. Councillor Demota has accepted, having made the motion to approve the agenda as amended, to add a slight change, and we'll amend it in 2 particulars. One is to add the in-camera item, and one to add Councillor McGrath's intended motion.
I suspect this related item has some relative significance to item 8.1. Correct?
Yes.
So then, slight request or slight change, I would make this amendment 8.2 and move the notice of appointment to 8.3. I wouldn't want to go from 8.1 to appointments, regional assessment, and then go back to.
Well, and in fact, it probably should even come before what is 8.1.
Okay, so you as chair will have to deal with this in a best orderly fashion for council. That's
yes, I agree with your comment that it fits better being discussed before Councillor Wilson's motion, because if it gets amended, then his motion to rescind is just a slightly different motion. And I do understand that nuance, and I'm quite happy to slot it in there, if it is the will of council that it gets on the agenda at all. There is a new motion now to add it, and can we say agenda item 8.01? Does that come before 8.1? Are you ready for the question? I see no affirmative or negative response, but all right. So all in favor then of the amended motion? There are none opposed, so that is carried. So thank you, Councillor McGrath. Then I will return to approval of the minutes. I think that I saw, well, maybe we did do the minutes. Can somebody recall whether I called the question on approval of the minutes? We did not. So I will call on someone to make a motion to approve the minutes of May 5th, 2020 regular meeting as presented. Councillor McGrath, thank you. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Presentations. We begin with the ECC update. Mr. Van Tighem, if you're all settled in there at your desk.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council, and everybody on the line. Last week was Emergency Preparedness Week in Canada, and the municipality of Jasper encouraged all residents to review their emergency plans, restock their emergency kits, and to consider the effects that the present COVID-19 pandemic could have on consecutive emergencies in our community. And we generally encouraged everyone to be prepared. While many emergencies could occur within the municipality of Jasper, most likely to occur are wildfire, severe storms, air, rail crashes, transportation incidents involving hazardous materials, electrical power blackouts, etc. Emergencies are situations or threats of serious impending disaster that could adversely affect a significant number of persons, properties, or areas. The municipality of Jasper's emergency response plan and the pandemic plan are tools used by the Municipal Emergency Coordination Center to assist municipal personnel in managing this emergency. All emergency situations are distinct from normal municipal operations, where coordinated activities among staff and management are adequate to resolve any issue. A pandemic is an unusual municipal emergency, as it is a global situation that affects everyone and every area differently. There are a lot of unknowns, such as local severity, duration, and final impact. A pandemic is also very unique in that it will affect not just the physical health of a community, but also the mental health, service provision, and the economy. Another unique trait of a pandemic is that it is a public health emergency, and as such, it is under the authority of the Alberta Health Services. However, the municipality is responsible for the effects that this pandemic causes to the community and its residents. As the Director of Emergency Management for the municipality of Jasper, my responsibility is to lead the municipal response through this COVID incident. Every municipality in Alberta is required to have emergency plans. They're required to appoint a Director of Emergency Management and follow the direction of the Alberta Emergency Management Agency through the various government acts and regulations. In Jasper, we activated our Emergency Coordination Center virtually on March 12th to manage the COVID-19 incident. We manage this through weekly operations using the Incident Command System. We presently have 7 staff virtually manning the ECC through a series of 4 Zoom meetings per week. Every week we set out objectives for the upcoming operational period. The objectives for this period are to maintain employee public health and wellness by following Alberta Health Services guidelines, to collaborate and support Alberta Health Services and other agencies as the relaunch program is implemented, to minimize operating costs while delivering essential services and COVID-19 response services, to maintain adequate inventory of personal protective equipment required for the COVID-19 response activities, to support the mental health of staff, and to provide weekly Emergency Coordination Center action updates to the public through the information officer. Presently in Jasper, there has been 9 confirmed cases of COVID-19. There is 1 active, there have been 7 recovered, and unfortunately 1 death. Alberta has 6,300 cases, which is up 47 cases in the last 24 hours, 117 deaths, which is up 0 in the last 24 hours. And to my knowledge, that's the first time there has been no increase in a 24-hour period. 4,659,099 have recovered. There have been a total of 69,981 cases in Canada, with 32,994 recovered cases and 4,993 deaths. Presently in Alberta, there are currently 73 individuals in the hospital, 12 of which are in the ICU. And that's an interesting point to note, because that is one of the factors that will be used by the province to to evaluate the relaunch strategies and the timing behind that. There have been 2,864 COVID-19 tests completed in the last 24 hours, which brings the province to a total of 188,157 tests completed to date. And currently there are 153 municipalities in Alberta that are operating an emergency coordination center. Last week, the Premier announced a relaunch strategy that would allow for gradual reopening of businesses and services in the province. This relaunch strategy involved 3 stages that would depend on the province's continued ability to control the spread of the coronavirus and curb the number of COVID-19 patients who need hospital care. Locally, Parks Canada's message is that the visitor services are still closed until at least May 31st. The municipality's message is stay home now in the midst of COVID-19 emergency is not the time to visit. Please save your travel for a time when we are best able to safely welcome you. We're battling these messages on 2 fronts. We have reduced visitor services, and we have residents concerned about visitors coming to town. And on the other side, we have businesses that are anxious to open up. As we approach the May long weekend, we continue to ask visitors to avoid travel to Jasper. Jasper National Park services and programs remain closed and all camping facilities remain closed. The minister has declared non-essential travel not recommended, including travel within Alberta, until at least stage 3 of the relaunch. Locally, we continue to work with our partnering agencies. We continue monitoring traffic in town. Parks Canada is monitoring traffic at trailheads and other points of interest along both highways. Clear signage is in place to indicate only essential services are available in Jasper. And we have kicked up our media campaign over the last 2 weeks. Within our Municipal Emergency Coordination Center, we have a branch of Emergency Social Services. They have the following priorities. First is to support the residents to ensure the basic needs are met. Refer residents to appropriate supports and services. Communicate with residents about the status of programs and services. Recently, the Emergency Social Services branch has noticed an increase in food insecurity in our community. Challenged with the current lack of financial resources and self-isolation requirements, many people do not have the resources to meet the basic needs. Lisa Daniels is the director of the Emergency Social Services. She is on this call, and I will pass any further questions for her to answer at the end of my report. Sidewalk seating. Up until the provincial relaunch announcement, we had actually suspended sidewalk seating for local business in Jasper because they could not comply to the Alberta Health directives. But now with the potential reopening date of May 14th, we have made permits available once again to those who can comply. We are presently working with Alberta Health Services and many local businesses and business owners to evaluate their ability to safely operate sidewalk seating under the Alberta Health guidelines. As I mentioned prior, there are other issues we have to keep in mind during a pandemic. And one of those in the forefront is the potential of secondary emergencies or concurrent emergencies along with the pandemic. In that regard, we have been working very closely with Parks Canada and over the last few months been doing a number of wildfire planning sessions and preparedness sessions in the event of a wildfire in our community during this COVID pandemic summer or fire season. Outside of the park, there are presently 9 wildfires burning in the forest protection area of Alberta, all of which are deemed under control at this time. There's other issues that other people have had, which may have gone unnoticed by some Jasper residents, but in the Fort McMurray area, the state of local emergency for overland flooding still remains in place. That's been in place for over 3 weeks. Over 2,456 people remain displaced from their homes due to flood damage, and there is a boil water advisory in place. There are extensive cleanup and repair costs, including silt and debris cleanup, road rehabilitation, and repairs to mechanical and electrical infrastructure of over 150 homes, 18 businesses as well. Mackenzie County had submitted recently a disaster recovery program application for a total of amount of $47 million to help them deal with the effects of the flooding that they've had, unfortunately, over the last 2.5 weeks. I'd like to close with just a mental health check and a reminder. A public health emergency like the COVID-19 pandemic can increase anxiety, stress, and fear, leaving many people feeling a loss of control. This may be exacerbated by public health directives to physically distance from one another, as connection is often an important tool in coping with difficult situations. I encourage everybody to try to be patient with yourselves and others during this time, as people may not be coping the way they usually do. And if you do require support to get through these unprecedented times, there are many resources available to ensure that you find the care you need for yourself. Alberta Health Services on the internet, you can Google any one of the Alberta Health Services links and you can come up with mental health assistance there. Also, if you need to talk to someone, check in with a close friend or a family member or call the 24-hour helplines. And I'll give you that right now. The mental health helpline is 1-877-303-2642. Encourage anybody that feels the need to reach out. Just a reminder, we all have a role to play to prevent the spread of COVID-19, and we all are required to stay positive and productive during this situation. So I encourage all residents to continue following the public health directives from Alberta Health Services, including physical distancing, frequent hand washing, and isolating if you're sick. Thank you very much. Your Worship, Council, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Van Tighem. Councillor Keller-Hrampe.
Thank you, Mr. Van Tighem, for your presentation. Excellent as always. You indicated in your presentation, as I have read with the Alberta Health Services, stage 1 and 2 is non-essential travel. There will be no travel till stage 3. Is there any indication of when stage 3 may happen?
Thank you, Councillor. I guess the benchmarks Alberta Health has indicated they will be using is basically is the curve flattening, and the way they're looking at that is one of the things they're looking at numbers of individuals in hospital beds as well as ICU units, and they're also looking at the number of cases through the 24-hour periods and if there's an increase, etc. So basically they have a formula. I'm not sure exactly what it is. They have a model that they follow, and using the inputs from the numbers in the hospitals and as well as the number of cases, the number of recovered cases, that type of intel, that's how they come up with whether I guess the curve is flattening, and that's where the relaunch would be at different points, the different stages of the relaunch would be let out. So to answer your question, I can't say, and nobody can say at this time, other than it's just, it's based on actual numbers, and it's based on cases, and it's basically based on the health of our province or of our country. So,
Mr. Van Tighem, do you see visitors coming to our park by June 1?
We have been monitoring traffic statistics, and we have also been doing reconnaissance rides out and through the community, hotel parking lots outside of the community to some of the viewpoints and sort of the points of interest. And there has been a slowly steady increase in number of visitors to the community over the last month. We have noticed more activity outside the town site, particularly at trailheads and points of interest. And we have also noticed a slight increase in visitation to the community, but to be honest, it's not a tremendous increase. We have some concerns with the upcoming May long weekend. We understand the messaging has been put out by the province and also by ourselves, of course, but we are still very concerned that some people may misinterpret that information or may choose to ignore it. So it's, as of now, all we can do is monitor and do our best to communicate, but what's going to happen this week, I'm not sure, this weekend. The parks is still, I think, a soft date of June 1st or May 31st, so that's still an unknown as well. So I guess that's one of the unfortunate things with this whole situation is there's things changing very rapidly and a lot of things not changing at all. And there's so many unknowns and so much, it's just very interactive. And we, like I've heard it said 100 times before, if I had a crystal ball, I could answer your question, but unfortunately we don't. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but we have seen an increase in visitation, but it hasn't been dramatic.
Thank you, Mr. Van Tieken.
Councillor McGrath.
Mr. Van Tieken, thank you very much for your ECC update. Particularly with the uncertainty and the concerns with this upcoming weekend, what is the plan to address those concerns?
Travel is not illegal. Visitation is not illegal. In that regard, we cannot stop people from, if they choose to come to Jasper. As I mentioned, it is not illegal. What is considered illegal is not following Alberta health directives, particularly the COVID-19 directives. And one of the most obvious ones would be social distancing. We have not had any concerns in the past with numbers in our community. For example, sidewalk usage or crowding in areas or things like that have not been an issue. We will be able to monitor that slightly, and the RCMP and Alberta Health are the two agencies that have the authority to enforce that. So again, I'm probably not answering your question other than, if the only thing we can enforce is Alberta Health regulation or directives due to COVID-19. We can't physically stop people from coming into our community. So we will be monitoring. I will be on the beat all weekend, as well as my bylaw staff, and our CMP we're meeting with them quite often, as well as the outside of the town site. We have the Parks Canada Law Enforcement Services. And yeah.
If I might just interject, I know that Councillor Demota is waiting, but this is relevant to Councillor McGrath's question of Mr. Van Tieken. And I can confirm that Friday of last week, Mayor Sorensen of Banff and I had telephone discussions with the Minister of Health, specifically seeking clarity on the question of domestic non-essential travel, what that means, and asking specifically that someone of the stature of Dr. Hinshaw clarify for us exactly what that might mean for our community. Yesterday, Mayor Sorensen, Mr. Furcho, and the CAO for Banff, Kelly Gibson, were on a call with Minister Furr, the Minister of Economic Trade Development and Tourism for the province, and again seeking the same clarity. There is some speculation that there may be a provincial announcement today. We have organized locally to get a message out that now is still not yet the time to come to Jasper. This issue was discussed at the first meeting of the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Task Force last week. That group agreed wholeheartedly with that approach, that we are not yet ready to safely and responsibly welcome visitors back to our community. So the message should get out that now is not yet the time. We are looking to reinvigorate that message. I can let Ms. Nadon speak to that if council is willing. There is an intent to get messaging out again through Parks Canada and through the municipality, again encouraging people that we are not yet in a position to safely and responsibly welcome them to our community. As soon as we are in that position, we will be overwhelmingly happy to start inviting guests back to our community, but now is not yet the time. So that message is consistent, but we are waiting today also for a reported announcement from the province, which again may change the playing field entirely. So Chief Van Tieken has rightly identified that we can enforce directives Recommendations are less so, and particularly if it changes in travel within the province is recommended, we are looking to, if not have an exemption, at least have a recognition that in national park communities, there is a somewhat different dynamic at play. And we have alignment certainly with the community through the Recovery Task Force and with Parks Canada to continue to get that message out. So it's shifting sand that we're standing on, but we have all confirmed that the primary objective is to protect our residents, to protect our workforce, and to protect the community. And in the long term, that better protects the economic recovery. So that's where we're at. I appreciate it's indistinct, but we're making every effort to get our voice heard at the provincial level so that when they do make an announcement, it is an announcement that takes into consideration the circumstances of our tourism-based community. Ms. Nadon, can you perhaps share any further details about the messaging that I think is supposed to get out today?
I can, Your Worship, but I think you've captured it quite well. So we've been working on an update from the Economic Recovery Task Force, but as Mr. Mayor Ireland indicated, the situation is constantly changing, and we don't want to get ahead of ourselves when further announcements from the province might come. But in essence, with the national park still being closed and businesses reopening starting in 2 days on May 14th, the focus is on ensuring that residents, workers, and business owners have the resources they need to ensure that we can safely resume our activities. And this might mean a bit more of a local clientele for those first couple weeks while we ensure that all those parameters are in place. And there are a number of resources that will be communicated as well, but the Jasper Employment and Education Center is offering some interesting seminars for employers and employees alike, and Community Futures West Yellowhead is actually hosting a live event on Facebook right now to help business owners navigate all the requirements with the COVID-19 pandemic. And then what's happening this week and what you will see coming from Parks Canada is a very aggressive campaign to let visitors know not to come to Jasper for the May long weekend. Our facilities are closed. Our businesses are working to ensure that they can provide safe environments for everyone. And as Mayor Ireland outlined, we're expecting an announcement from the province today about more clarification around the non-essential travel piece. But having that said, echoing Mr. Van Teegam's comment, non-essential travel is not recommended at this point. It is not prohibited, and therefore people are not breaking any laws if they're coming to Jasper. So it's a fine balance between supporting our tourism economy and letting businesses be able to open and do some business, but at the same time, we don't want to overwhelm our local resources. And the next few weeks will be crucial in determining how that all unfolds. And I guess in closing, you can expect an Economic Recovery Task Force update to come out later today, as well as Parks Canada news release that will be used for some pretty aggressive media relations with Edmonton media to get the message out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nadon. Councillor Demota, I'm sorry I had to make you wait so long.
I'm glad you did, and thank you for recognizing me. I think that my line of questioning, with all the information that's given, has more implications after the director's report for protective services. So thanks.
All right, thank you. Councillors, are there any other questions for Chief Van Teegem? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Van Teegem. I just have one question. You mentioned, or you acknowledged that we cannot stop people from coming to town. It's not illegal to come to town. Of course, the hotels are open. But then you also mentioned that you are regularly patrolling the community and hotel parking lots and monitoring. And I'm wondering, what is the intent of those patrols and the desired outcome there? Obviously, we can't tell people to leave. So what is the goal and intent with the patrols that you mentioned?
the reason for that is simply just to keep our fingers on the pulse of what's going on. We're maintaining data just as a benchmark to notice if there is any spikes or increases. We're not using it any means for any type of enforcement. It's strictly just information gathering, just to monitor if there are any fluxes in numbers and to give us an idea if we need to, look at things a little closer. And as I said earlier, we haven't noticed anything substantial that worrisome at this point. Obviously, we all know there are a number of contractor type people in the community. So there is a lot more activity around the community than there may be, or would have been if we didn't have the projects going on with some of the bigger agencies. But strictly data collecting and strictly just to follow the trends of numbers and whatnot.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Other questions from councillors? Councillor Journeau, are you trying to get my attention? You are not, but you did. You succeeded in something that you weren't even trying. All right, if there are no other questions for Chief Van Tighem, thank you for that report. We will hear from you again soon, but we will consider agenda item 4.1, the ECC update concluded, and move to agenda item 4.2, a presentation regarding enhancing guest experience while social distancing. And I saw him earlier on my screen, so I will welcome Mr. Brett Ireland. And just for clarity, I have researched the MGA with respect to matters of conflict, and I am satisfied that because we're not, well, it depends what we do, but there is not a conflict. Technically, Brett is not my family because he is neither my parent, my spouse, nor my child. He is my nephew, and there is no possibility of pecuniary advantage in this. So I think I am well able to remain in the meeting and hear the presentation and without being in conflict, but I thought that I should raise that. There are a number of people watching and issues of conflict are always of concern. But I feel that there is no conflict, but I make that point knowingly. So with that, Mr. Ireland, go ahead.
Thank you. So good morning, councillors and mayor. My name is Brett Ireland, and I'm the co-founder of Jasper Brewing. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to council and to share what I feel is an innovative and strategic community response to the COVID-19 crisis. Public spacing in public spaces. We believe there's an opportunity to improve the highest priority of the community, the safety of its residents and visitors, and at the same time, increase business viability and improve the visitor's experience. Really what we're talking about is a path to get staff back to work and get businesses in a better position to pay the bills. Our request is this: managing public spaces with an eye towards safety. We're seeking a motion for council to establish a plan and budget for the temporary summer downtown use of street side parking along Patricia Street and the use of the southbound lanes and street side parking of Connaught Drive to address public safety and assist local businesses during the COVID crisis. Given that members of the community are not able to attend council meetings in person right now, we felt it would be good to bring some of their thoughts on this idea to you by video. I feel it's worth noting that these submissions were pulled together yesterday in just under 12 hours.
Hi, I'm Lynn Wanup. I own and operate Coco's Cafe. Due to the reopening allowances, we have decided not to reopen our dining room for the foreseeable future. Our 3-table patio would allow us to serve our customers this summer in a safe and allowable manner. So we fully support the motion to council to increase pedestrian space and the additional room for business on Patricia and Connaught for the summer of 2020.
My name is John Holton, General Manager of Pine Bungalows. I support the motion before council to increase pedestrian space and make more room for businesses on Patricia and Connaught for the summer of 2020.
Hi, my name is Reg Curry. I'm one of the owners here at Famoso in Jasper National Park, and I just wanted to voice my support for an increase in pedestrian walking space along Patricia and Connaught streets, as well as an increase in patio seating along those streets as well. Thanks, and hopefully this works out.
Hi, my name is Karen Jacobs, and I own Mountaineer Clothing, and I support the motion to council to increase pedestrian space and additional room for businesses on Patricia and Connaught this summer of 2020. Thanks.
Hi, councillors. I'd just like to put my support behind the sidewalk proposal that's before you today. I think it's a great social distancing opportunity for the public and will enhance the experience this summer. Thanks very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark. I'm the General Manager at Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge. I support the motion to increase patio and pedestrian space on Connaught and Patricia. I believe that we will need to get much more creative going forward in order to make sure that everyone stays healthy and safe, but also that our local business community has the opportunity to thrive despite all the regulations and restrictions that we have.
Hi, my name is Stavros Corrigonis. I'm the owner of Jasper Pizza Place. I am here to support the proposal that would increase pedestrian walkway on Connaught Drive and Patricia Street, as well as increase patio seating. I believe it would provide a safer environment for both our guests and our staff, and it would be a novel idea to help businesses recover during this time. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm George Andrew, owner of the Astoria Hotel, Papa George's Restaurant, and the Dead Dog Pub. These are my managers, Oliver, my son, and Steph, my daughter. And we support the idea of closing part of Connaught Drive off for pedestrian traffic and sidewalk seating.
Hey, it's Alex and Salk from Jasper Brewing Company. We support the idea of expanding pedestrian space on Connaught and Patricia for the summer of 2020. We think this will offer a safer guest experience and staff alike. Thank you. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Brady Bangle. I own North Face Pizza. I support the motion to council to increase pedestrian traffic and room for businesses on Connaught Drive in Jasper for the summer of 2020. Thanks.
All right. Hi, everybody. Dave McKenna here from Pursuit. Julie and I have been out isolating out at the ranch here in Cremona since this whole thing went down. And we're getting ready to reanimate and get going again. I've heard talk of us being able to think about adding some pedestrian-friendly action onto Patricia Street or even Connaught. I think it's a great idea. Wonderful way to give people a little bit more room and really make it a fantastic experience that, who knows, maybe long-term change the face of Jasper for the better. So good luck with it, and thank you very much for considering it. Take care.
Hi, I'm Becky Artiaga. I'm one of the owners of Earl's Restaurant in Jasper. I'm here today to support the proposal to increase the size of the pedestrian walkways on Patricia and Connaught for summer of 2020. Thank you.
To date, nearly 200 communities around the world are addressing the need for spacing by increasing pedestrian areas. We understand there are at least 28 doing so in Canada so far. And as of yesterday, I think we can add Banff to that list. Council there voted unanimously in favor for a similar motion for the 100 and 200 blocks of Banff Avenue. Businesses and their employees have faced incredible uncertainty and seemingly endless challenges over the past few months. To be frank, it's been nothing short of terrifying. We feel it's critical to begin looking to the future with cautious optimism and encourage businesses to begin planning for the next phase of the environment we're all moving in. It's our hope that with this idea, we can salvage a piece of the wonderful summer seasons we've been fortunate to have experienced in the past. There's a need for more space. As we heard from some of the video, some businesses are not viable within the new operating restrictions. whether it be to their physical layouts or the impact the restrictions place on the economics of their businesses. 50% is not a viable scenario on its own when looked at through the pragmatic safety lens, cost, and revenue impacts. Similarly, service and rental businesses such as bike rentals and retailers need more space to offer their products and services. Additional outdoor sidewalk space helps with this. We've seen growing success in many communities with takeout and storefront pickup, and we anticipate demand for these offerings to increase. However, this also increases the need for consumers to have more space to line up for pickup. The current configuration does not work if this demand increases substantially. Finally, this idea provides the community with an opportunity to be dynamic and adapt to the changing circumstances and makes us flexible. I want to provide a bit of context around our recommendation. Without question, volumes will be down this summer. We'll be experiencing slowly phased visitor flow, beginning with hyper-regional to regional and then to national. Guests are expecting their experiences to be managed and restricted. This idea provides a measured and hopefully positive response to that. We understand that national border openings are not anticipated until late summer. No international guests means less volumes and less RVs. We can leverage this opportunity to balance the parking spaces that would be repurposed. No tour buses means smaller groups. We need to consider how this impacts all elements of the business community, such as the Shell on Connaught, the motorcycle tours on Patricia, as well as the rafting buses and individuals with reduced mobility. We believe it is best to leave these details to the town's experts within the administration. Again, this is up to the experts, but we suggest using street side parking for pedestrians up to the post office on Patricia and retain the vehicle intersection at Connaught and Mayette. We've all heard about Huntington Beach. We don't want to be the bad headline. We want to be the good headline. The Jasper brand is one of the community's greatest assets. We cannot afford to have its image associated with what we have seen in other parts of the world. And we know this is not a viable solution. Our safety recommendations are to use the streets and sidewalks for pedestrians and businesses to space safely, allow for additional picnic areas within the new pedestrian space on Connaught for visitors to enjoy things like curbside takeout, provide the opportunity for retailers to offer their products outdoors, improve the safety of our staff, retain emergency vehicle access along Connaught Drive by using movable barriers, and in aggregate, create a space that is adaptable as conditions evolve. So in closing, we're seeking a motion from council to direct administration to establish a plan and a budget for the temporary summer downtown changes for the streets inclusive of the 400, 500, and 600 blocks of Connaught Drive's southbound lane, and to extend the sidewalks into the street parking along the 500, 600, and parts of the 400 block of Patricia Street for the purpose of improving public safety and assisting local businesses during the ongoing COVID crisis for final approval at the May 26th, 2020 meeting of council. Thank you for your consideration and for your time.
Thank you, Brett. Questions from councillors? I think I saw Councillor Wilson first. Councillor Demota. I will get to you all, but I will start with Councillor Wilson.
Well, I'd like to just start off by saying, it's not really a question, but I'd like to say this is pretty impressive. I'm quite happily surprised at the collection of business owners that you've got in support of this already. It definitely speaks to the entrepreneurial spirit and resilience of our local business community. And I think this is our pivot point, or these businesses pivot point. Jasper Tourism, James Jackson put a presentation together for us a couple of weeks ago, and one of the movements back to normalcy or business as the new normal is the pivot point. And honestly, I'd love to get behind this. I think there's always solutions. It may not bring business back up to 100%. It is going to be still 50 or whatever it ends up being throughout the summer, but it's definitely thinking outside the box or well, in this case, thinking outside the building. So I would definitely be in support of putting this motion together. And I see the urgency of it now. Like I don't want to speak to this motion or this direction for weeks, months to come. I think now is the time for action. Another business owner has suggested to me that the sun is setting here on this season, and we have to make all efforts to maximize earning potential. So I'm definitely in support of this. Other councils can speak to it, but I would be willing to put this motion forward.
Councillor Demota?
Well, in traveling and visiting cities like Paris and Barcelona, ex-councillor Wallow has said if I was going to say Barcelona, I have to say with the T's, Barcelona, that these areas have been doing tourism for a lot longer and on a greater scale than we have here in our neighboring communities. And I think the direction that Banff is taking on this or wants to take is big. And I think it'd be monumental for our town as well. And there's other areas that are excelling and have great progress with initiatives like this that are working in their communities. And I think we can adapt a style of this for our community. And I'm looking forward to see what can come out of this. Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, Rico.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Councillor McGrath?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ireland, for your presentation. It was certainly engaging, and it's very proactive. You know, to be talking about this today is just the right amount of time. We do have the recovery task force that is fully engaged, and I think it's super appropriate for it to go to that table, and many of the players at that table were probably people that were included in the videos. So definitely lots of work needs to go into this, and I agree with Councillor Wilson, it needs to happen in a timely fashion for the benefit of the businesses in Jasper. And I also appreciate the inclusion of considering the challenges of persons with mobility issues, the motorcycle tour company, and parking for seniors. So I think there's lots to go over and lots to consider, but this will absolutely present an opportunity to create a more vibrant downtown and to draw a huge appeal and attraction to our town this summer. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Councillor Keller-Hrenty and then Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Ireland, for your presentation. It's good to see you again, Brett. I'd like to note that we have received as council 3 complaints against this already. We have 1 retailer, we have 1 small tour operator, and we have a hotel that have concerns. So, you know, I think it's a great idea. For years, we talked about shutting down Patricia Street, making it pedestrian. However, you know, there's a lot of factors that has to go into this, a lot of planning. And I think, like Councillor McGrath, this should go to the task force. That's what the recovery committee was put together for, and for them to bring back a recommendation to council.
Councillor Butler.
Most of what I wanted to ask or say was mentioned by Councillor Kelleher MP. I've already received 4 letters opposed to this. So here we go. I'd like to say I'm in principle in favor of creating of the principle, but whether the details in the motion are, whether the motion adequately addresses the details of how this would be rolled out, I'm not clear on. But my question is actually for Mayor Ireland, Your Worship. You are our seat on the Recovery Task Force, and I thought this was exactly the kind of consideration that that task force would be looking at. So I wonder if you can offer insight at why this is coming already directly to council, when I understood that the task force is where these kind of things would be considered and then brought forward, you know, with a broadly scoped recommendation that considers all aspects, rather than, you know, maybe just those who are clearly in support.
Certainly a valid question, and you know, I cannot dictate who comes to council with ideas, but certainly it is open for council to refer the question to the Economic Recovery Task Force. And I agree that that is a group that is well suited to accommodate this. At the end of it, though, recommendations will come back to council for approval. And because it's talking about a different use of public space, it is inherently a council decision at the end of it. But I fully agree that it's a matter that can and perhaps ought to be referred to the Economic Recovery Task Force, which will be sitting tomorrow. And so I can certainly ensure that they are aware of it and they can make recommendations as well. And I too am sensitive to the fact that there is some opposition, but as I read the suggested motion, and it's not our motion, it is to direct administration to look at the possibilities, to consider the details. And I think the presentation was quite fair, and although it of course was focused on those who are already in agreement, but it fairly considered other needs, such as the motorcycle tour company that would be directly impacted. And those are inherently, again, issues that I think administration can assist with. So I think that referring it to both the Economic Recovery Task Force is wise, and having administration look at the particular nature of safety impacts if we try and change travel patterns on Connaught in particular, what that might look like. But it's only so far a suggestion with an intent to come back here. So I accept what you say, and I'm happy to refer it tomorrow to the Economic Recovery Task Force. Go ahead, Councillor Butler, and then I'll go to Mr. Burchill.
Great, thank you. And that's exactly my suggestion. I'm glad to hear that you're meeting tomorrow. And to the question of timing, I know that the task force is meeting often and regularly, so I don't think that referring it to the task force for a little further study is will slow things down unduly. Again, I'm certainly supportive of the principle here. So thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Ireland, or Brett Ireland.
Mr. Furcho, you wanted to get in, and then Councillor Demota.
Great, thank you. And thanks, Brett. That was excellent presentation. Just before we get going too far on this one, I just want to ask the question while Brett's still on. I think your suggestion was around closing like some parking stalls like Canmore does, kind of thing, versus closing the whole street. So I just want to make sure there's no confusion between those two things, if it does end up coming back to administration, that what we're talking about.
Yeah, the idea would be for Patricia to use those street side parking spaces to extend the sidewalks essentially, and then Connaught with the dual laneways, that there might be an opportunity to shut one of those down and make the other a two-way. That was the idea. So yeah, again, it's not, the idea isn't to completely shut down Patricia Street at all. There'd still be vehicle traffic through it.
Councillor Wilson, are you trying to make a point of order?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt in this discussion, but in the chat, like when it, we received messages from the public. This meeting has more than 100 individuals, and I think it's capped at 100. That's great news that so many people are tuning in, but I think some more people are trying to tune in and are unable. So we are restricting people to attend this, which is
that might be a
great.
software limitation we're going to have to figure out right away here.
Okay.
We'll look at our subscription.
Sorry for that.
On that point then, can this presentation that we just received be put on our website for those who are unable to log in to this meeting due to technical limitations? And I'm told that yes, it can. So I'm going to assume then, but because it can be done, it will be done. So thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Demota.
I think just addressing some of the comments made by other councillors, like often whenever any ideas come forward, you're always going to get some negative responses, and sometimes right away. And Mr. Ireland, Brett Ireland, has already addressed that some companies that are already operating might have some limitations, but I think that if we all work progressively together, we could make something wonderful in our community.
Thank you all. Does council wish to make a direction at this time to administration to do any study, or would council prefer to have something come back first from the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Task Force as, or by way of recommendation? Councillor Wilson?
Well, my suggestion would be to start moving on it as quickly as we can, because we will need to work with, you know, be it the Recovery Task Force, but administration will need to do a fair amount of work to make this happen. And of course, time is clearly of the essence. So we should start moving on this at this point as well, to meet in the middle and then jump on it by the time we are welcoming visitors back.
Thank you. Other comments on that? Councillor McGrath?
I'm in agreement with that direction for administration to work with maybe Mr. Ireland or with the Economic Recovery Task Force to find solutions in a timely manner to enhance the viability of Jasper's downtown businesses.
Sorry, I'm just checking screens, looking for other hands. In the absence of objection, I would propose that we give that direction to administration to commence looking at the feasibility of this and what would be required from a municipal administrative standpoint if we were to adopt some enlarged pedestrian areas. And at the same time, a direction that the matter be referred to the Economic Recovery Task Force seeking a recommendation. If there is not an objection, I would say that that is our direction. I cannot see one councillor, so I cannot tell whether there is any objection. There he is. You're good with that. Perfect. Thank you then. So Mr. Furcho, you have direction from council to engage administration into looking at what might be feasible based on what we've heard. And it's not a set proposal, it's a concept. So figure out what might be achievable from a municipal perspective. At the same time, we will refer the matter to the Economic Recovery Task Force for a recommendation from that as well. Brett, you had indicated that you were looking for a decision perhaps by May 22nd. So I would propose that this matter come back with a report for council and the possibility of a motion of some nature. I won't project what that's going to be for 2 weeks hence. And I wanted to thank you, Brett, before you go, for a couple of things. Again, the sensitivity to businesses that might be negatively impacted, and in fact, we have to take that into consideration. But I also want to emphasize, as I understand the presentation, this would encompass all businesses on street side. So whether they are restaurants, retail, or other, it's not restricted to any sector of commercial activity. It is the entire commercial district that you would propose take advantage of outdoor space to enhance the pedestrian atmosphere, safety of those walking around, and business opportunities. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. The idea is to support all the businesses.
All right. If there is nothing else, thank you very much for that presentation. You have the direction that you requested, and hopefully you'll engage with the Economic Recovery Task Force and possibly with administration in the next 2 weeks, and perhaps we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another presentation, agenda item 4.3. budget reduction and required service reductions. Ashley Cleaver is out there. I see her on the screen, and Mr. Percho, you have allowed her to enter. So Ms. Cleaver, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for taking the time to read my letters regarding the property tax reduction for 2020. I greatly appreciate the time and deliberation you have all put into making the decision to make this tax reduction and subsequent updated budget for our community. I subscribe to the Alberta Health Services Daily Text for Hope, and this morning's message was, it's okay to make mistakes and to have a bad day. Every new day is a new opportunity to learn and to do better. As a resident, I feel frustrated as I trusted that I would be made aware when major decisions that would impact my life in Jasper were happening so that I could learn and understand the options available and feel comfortable with the decisions of my elected officials. The municipality of Jasper has a public engagement policy that states, the municipality of Jasper recognizes that public engagement is a vital part of local democracy. To this end, the municipality is committed to providing honest, meaningful, and accessible engagement opportunities for residents and stakeholders, promoting understanding of local issues, informed decision-making, and best possible solutions to local issues, integrating public engagement in decision-making at all levels of the organization, and providing sufficient timeframes and adequate resources to plan, coordinate, and conduct public engagement process. At some point, I feel that the public engagement was missed on this decision. If I and the 17 others who took the time to write to council at the time that this agenda was printed, and the 118 participants that are watching on this right now, are all misled, then there's a communication gap somewhere between town council, administration, and the residents, and I hope this exercise helps us all to learn how to work together moving forward, so that we can all be confident and proud of the direction our little town is moving in. I am amazed that if given the choice, many members of our community would rather pay more in taxes to support and maintain our town. This speaks volumes to the excellent stewardship that our council and municipal administration. The COVID-19 situation is rapidly changing with new information, federal and provincial assistance programs for individuals and businesses evolving daily. A lot has changed since the decision was passed to reduce the town's property taxes and subsequent budget to run essential services. Please listen to your people and see the opportunity you have now to learn and to do better. Please take a moment to reconsider how this landmark decision and how it is communicated will impact the faith you have earned from your constituents. Thank you, Council.
Richard, you're muted.
My apologies. Again, thank you, Ms. Cleaver, for that. Thank you for engaging with council. It's appreciated. Are there questions from councillors regarding the presentation? Right, Councillor Wilson?
Well, it's pretty hard to, I find it pretty hard to speak in public. I'm not sure why I signed up to be on council, but actually, I really thank you for stepping up and speaking in front of what seems to be a record-breaking attendance to council. On my time on council, we haven't had more than 10 people in the gallery, but 100 in the gallery is pretty excellent. So thank you for speaking with us and appreciate your input.
Thank you. Then if there are no questions, it might be an opportune time just to confirm for those 100 and I think I last saw 114 or 117. So the 100 threshold seems to have been resolved somehow. In any event, for all of those people who are out there watching, yes, 117. Ms. Cleaver took the initiative to get herself on our agenda as a presenter. Others have written letters, some of which are on the agenda, some of which are not, and many people are watching, and at least one of those people watching has raised a virtual hand. In the normal course of events, when we get to matters on the agenda, if there are people physically present in the gallery, I can, as chair of the meeting, invite them to speak, whether or not they are on the agenda. Typically, I do not do that without consulting council first. I am certainly prepared to follow that same practice in this virtual world, but I would suggest that we wait until we get to an agenda item related to that, which would be under agenda item 8, at which time I will again, if there are hands in the virtual gallery that are raised, I will adopt a practice of asking council whether they wish to hear from anybody. I appreciate it that in the circumstances we cannot take questions from 117 people. There are real limitations. We are doing the best we can to mimic what we would do in public, but as Councillor Wilson has indicated, our public meetings never drew more than 10 or a dozen people, and typically they would be in a group recognizing one thing and would have a spokesperson. So we are challenged by the new order of things, and we will do our best to get through it. But for those now waiting, hoping to ask questions, we will address that matter again at a later date. Councillor Butler, you wish to comment, and also Councillor Demota.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I very much appreciate it. I think what I would like to ask, and it's primarily a question for clarification, you've referenced your objection to the tax reduction, which we passed on April 7th with a lot of public debate, and 5 weeks or so have now passed. I respect that some of the budget cuts that we passed last week have to some extent taken the community by surprise, because maybe the community didn't, or we didn't make it clear enough what we meant when we said that we were going to have to put ourselves on an essential services footing. And that's what we're doing. We are doing our best to provide essential services. But the fact is that the motion around the tax reduction is related undoubtedly, but a separate issue from the expense reductions that we passed yesterday or last week. Expense reductions are necessitated to reduce our expenses. And so my question is, after that long-winded process, is really, where does your objection lie? Is your objection around the fact that council chose to reduce the tax requisition this year, or is your objection around the cost-saving budget reductions that we put into place last week? I'd like some clarity on what it is you're finding objectionable in the actions of council. Thank you.
Yeah, so everyone is having to reduce their budgets right now. Family budgets, business budgets, municipal budgets. Everyone is going to have less money to work with moving forward. When the property tax reduction was rolled out as an effort to ease the tax burden on Jasperites, I don't think the people of Jasper fully understood what that was going to look like. And based on how our businesses work in Jasper, a reduction now, the real challenge is going to be this time next year. Right now, we're still kind of floating through last summers because we make our money in summer. So by then having to increase our taxes significantly next year, provincial taxes will be going up significantly next year, federal taxes will be going up significantly next year. If the residents are saying they would rather pay their taxes now so the municipality has more money in the pot to provide services that are needed for the town, I do understand some things have to be cut. I think you should listen to the residents that we would rather pay a bit more and have access to more services that we find essential.
Councillor Butler, do you wish to follow up?
I will, and this will be my last follow-up, but I would like to follow up because I want to reiterate the point that I'm not certain, and maybe we'll learn more when we look at Councillor Wilson's motions to rescind both the motion for the tax reduction and the motion for the expense reductions. But I think it's very important for the community to understand that while there is obviously a connection between the two, they are two separate motions with different intents. And I don't think that the community could assume that if we had not provided tax relief for the community, that if we had not chosen to do that, that we would in turn not have chosen the necessity of the cost reductions. I believe that council has been very clear since before we passed the motion on the tax reduction that cost reductions were going to be necessary, expense reductions were going to be necessary to meet the economic realities of the community, and that they were going to be painful. And that motion and that intent is in fact fairly separate from the tax reduction. So it would not be reasonable to assume necessarily that if we restored the tax envelope, that we would feel that we should then reverse the expense reductions. So it's the point I wanted to make and ensure that that is clear at this point. Thank you. And thank you again for your presentation. It is brave to come and sit in front of the community as you've done.
Thank you, Ms. Cleaver. I will allow you to respond before I turn to Councillor Demota.
Thank you, and I do understand that, and I know that cuts are going to be made, but if the community is saying that we would rather pay for services that they may not be essential to you, Councillor Butler, but a lot of these services are essential to other demographics of the community, and I think that people are saying that if there is a chance to save any of those things, even if it's at a lesser extent, they would choose to have more options available. So thank you very much.
Councillor Demota. You will now have to unmute.
I'm sorry. I'm not muted. I thought I am unmuted.
You are now.
Go ahead. Oh, okay. No, I thought Councillor Butler wanted to confirm something that he said. Okay. Well, you know, I appreciate all the letters that have come in, and to me they seem somewhat solicited. And when I have the experience of this in the past, you know, when you have common language and common statistics, it comes from a certain place. And I know that there's a core of people that, you know, want to get council's attention, and I appreciate that. And you know, I love all the response we can get, and I'm so admirable of the amount of people that are on here. It's very hard sometimes to get one person to come out to council. So now that we have this opportunity, I hope down the road we can implement this type of service to the community, that they can chime in anytime we're having a council meeting. I remember not too long ago during election time that there were a lot of people in the community that were against taxes going up. And, you know, I know that when we start to make decisions, it does have implications. So if we do a 12% reduction this year, you know, that might be a 12% increase in years to come. So we don't have that scope yet. We don't know what that's going to be like. In regards to the motion to rescind, sometimes I have to take weight in the silent majority, and there's a lot to be attributed there. And from what I've experienced in the past, when we do get a slew of information like this all at once in regards to a particular motion, it's not representing the entire community. And although the letters are passionate and there is a lot of worthwhile content, sometimes people that are writing in feel that they're speaking on behalf of the rest of the community, and I beg to differ. So some of the comments in the letters reference to council making hasty decisions, or that we may have the best intentions, but we have the wrong approach. This process started with consultation in November. It changed when the pandemic changed all our lives. We had to make some changes, and we'll continue to do so as our landscape continues to transform. We heard from residents who don't want to get their taxes cut, But at the same time, I've heard from people who do have approved accommodations that really rely on travelers to our community that help pay for their mortgages. Right now, they're stating that some type of relief, any type of relief is good in the time being until we could start going at this. So, you know, when I look at the elected officials who voted in favor of the current tax cuts, we've got Councillor Keller Rampy, former chamber manager, tourism development specialist for GARE. She had her own bookkeeping business, and she's currently the finance director of Sundog Tours. She's been through 8 budget cycles, also a homeowner. Councillor McGrath, our young entrepreneur and former employee of the municipality. She's raising a family and still finding time to be one of our forward-thinking minds on council. Councillor Journeau, longtime member of the community, raised a family here, was a member of council before it was even a council, former bank manager of CIBC, owned and operated 2 gas stations in Jasper, owned a home in Jasper. Councillor Butler, born and raised in Jasper, raised a family here, brought up in the hospitality industry, owned and operated businesses, including a hotel, also a homeowner. Myself, I don't need to do any self-praising here. I just wanted to say that I have 30 years experience in the community, working in all sectors, and I've been through 13 budget cycles. So when I'm posed with comments like our decisions are not well informed or we have the best intentions, but for the wrong reasons, I'm going to say that you might be right. However, based on all the work and material we have covered since November, my confidence and understanding of our situation is the best ground I feel I can stand on. The only other option presented is let's keep everything the same and cross our fingers. That's a strategy based on hope. And as we've heard from our expert in tourism, hope is not a strategy. So with regards to the budget, you know, the budget committee in quotations, meeting in camera, we were suggested to do that because of FOIP. And certain jobs may have been at stake at the time, and it was pertinent to discuss those matters that weren't in a public realm. So I apologize for some of the lack of communication that we've had. That's certainly something we could be doing better as a council and as an administration as well. And I'd like to work towards enhancing those for the future so that people are better informed. But I feel that the decisions that we've made in the past have strong ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. I allowed you to continue uninterrupted. I did see Councillor Wilson trying to make a point of order, and I cannot necessarily know what that was, but I think that your comments would have been more appropriate when we get to the agenda item motion to rescind rather than directed at this presenter. She has made a presentation and willingly put herself here, and I think it's appropriate to ask questions of her if you have questions. But you have now made your comments, and so that will presumably save us some time when we get to agenda item 8.1. But Councillor Wilson, I apologize that I did not interrupt on your point of order, but
No, that was most definitely the point of order here, speaking to the next motion, sorry, next item on the agenda, not to Mr. Taylor's presentation.
Recognize, yes. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cleaver, for your presentation and for coming forward and putting yourself out there, because it is brave and it's bold and it's beautiful, and thank you very much. Likely we will make mistakes, and I acknowledge that. I make mistakes every single day, and we will have to readapt and we will have to alter things, just as other organizations and communities will have to do as we learn more and as we discover what the future looks like in these really uncertain times. The thing that I'd like to comment on is what you've pointed out in our communications. And I entirely agree. We can do so much better. We can be so much more transparent. We can do so much better at communicating our intentions and our messages with the community. Since I've been elected, I have been screaming from the rooftops about our communications getting better and improving, and I'm just as frustrated as you at this whole process and the way that this appears to our residents who we love and value. And we are on your side and we are with you every step of the way. So thank you so much for coming forward. We can do better. We will do better. And we just need to all work together.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Any other questions for Ms. Cleaver as a presenter? No. All right. Seeing none, I will thank you again for your presentation. I agree with all the comments that it is a very exposed situation that you put yourself in. You have to be resolute and determined and brave to appear before not just council, but about 120 other members of the community. So thank you for doing that. We will allow you to leave now, and hopefully you will continue to watch the proceedings. Council, we have been at this now since 9:30. It might be an appropriate time for a small recess, and then we will continue with agenda item 5. I have 11:12. Let us say we will commence again at 11:20. So an 8-minute recess, and then we will reconvene. Thank you. I have 11:20, so if other councillors have returned, I will call us back to session. Thank you all. I will call us back to order, and we are at agenda item 5, business arising. Is there any business arising from the minutes of May 5th? Hearing none. Department reports. We have a report from Protective Services. Mr. Van Tighem.
Just one moment, I'll get him on here. Okay, Greg, you're up.
I lost my video. You have my report, and I would like to give you the opportunity if there's any questions related to that report.
All right. Thank you, Chief Van Tighem. I think that I heard what you had to say, although it was sort of half muted, but I think you identified that council has your report, and if there are questions, you are able to entertain those. So are there questions from councillors with respect to the written report from Protective Services, which is attached to the agenda? Sorry, Councillor Demota.
Well, I appreciate the report, and I can't imagine the amount of work that Mr. Van Tighem has to go through these days with being a director and being on the ECC. So there's a lot of information to process and then relate back to us. I just, in regards to the requests that came out from some business owners in the community that have the outdoor seating. And I just wanted to know from recommendations of the ECC and what the past permit holders had in place, and the opportunity to move into the May long weekend for locals and maybe other people passing through that want to partake in some of that. And I just wanted to hear if there was an update on that.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. I think you're asking for an update on the sidewalk seating. If that's the case, we have been actively engaged with a number of local businesses over the last few weeks, more so over the last week since the change in the relaunch strategy to fast track the reopening of certain businesses. Particularly the bylaw chief, enforcement officer, licensing officer, Neil Jones, has been interacting with Wen Lee from Alberta Health, as well as a number of businesses. And in a nutshell, the requirement for social distancing has caused some difficulties with bylaw seating as sidewalk seating as we knew it previously. Social distancing has become a challenge in some situations where people don't have enough space in front of their business. But again, this is a COVID-19 Alberta Health situation, and the guidelines are laid out very specifically, and business owners must follow those guidelines. And as I suggested in the last report, we are working with them and assisting them as much as we can, and we're also engaged with Alberta Health Services to get their direction as well. There possibly may be a number of businesses that do not qualify just based on the square footage or the size of the footprint of their actual sidewalk seating area. However, again, just to sum this up, we work with it. We will be working and are working with anybody interested in renewing their permits. The restrictions will be based on Alberta Health guidelines, and we will do what we can to help them through it.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Demota?
Yeah, I'm glad that we have that update, and that's all I was asking for. It's just that piece of communication. I appreciate all the work that everybody's doing to help facilitate in the best way we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other questions for Chief Van Tighem, then we can continue with the agenda. I just wanted to take a moment here before I proceed with the next agenda items, just to remind particularly all those participating in the virtual world. The municipality of Jasper maintains a respectful workplace, and that applies to all of our facilities. It would certainly apply to our council chambers. I consider that this space is also a workplace. It's a workplace for staff and for council. And we are entitled to expect that our same rules about respectful workplace apply in this setting. And so I appreciate that people have views, and some of those views might be better expressed on social media. But this is a workplace, and so I just invite everybody to consider what comments might be added if we find that there is no ability to control what is said. Then we may have to look at opportunities to discontinue that service. It's an important point, so I just remind everybody that this is a workplace for many, and we are committed to maintaining a respectful workplace, and I ask everybody to work to that end. So thank you for that. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much for that, Mayor Ireland. As the public can probably see, I'm quite affected right now, and it's taking I probably can't talk right now, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath, and that simply reinforces the point that this is a venue where we do debate and we are welcome to disagree, but that does not mean that it provides an opportunity for disrespectful comments. So I just remind everybody that we have an equal duty to maintain civility on council and among the public, and certainly if we were in physical council chambers, I would have a much greater ability to control what happens. It's not impossible to have that control in this setting, and if necessary, we will find ways to make that happen. But it would be easier not to have to do anything and just expect that people are going to respond in an appropriate fashion at all times. Agenda item 7 is next. We have no bylaws for consideration today. So we move to agenda item 8, and we added 8.01 to precede 8.1, which was Councillor McGrath's motion added to the agenda to amend a previous motion rather than to rescind that previous motion. I appreciate Councillor McGrath experiencing some personal difficulties, but if you're prepared to proceed with your motion, go ahead.
Thank you. My amendment to motion 134/20 is, if Councillor Butler would agree to accept, is really to facilitate understanding and awareness in the community in regards to the motion that was passed last Tuesday. I feel that it left the community too uncertain, and my attempt to amend this motion would be to assure the community that we are committed to reopening. My amendment would be that council direct administration to follow public health guidelines, and when facilities may be considered to be reopened, the information be presented to council in a timely manner to plan for reopening, which will allow us to discuss the financial arrangements on how we will plan to reopen our facilities, but also give the community certainty that we are with them, that we are behind them, that we want their wellness as well to participate in the arena, swimming, aquatic center, fitness facility, and the activity center, as well as the daycare. But I can make some statements about that later. The motion would just to be a little bit more explicit, to direct administration to come to us whenever these conversations may be started. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. I believe it first to Councillor Butler. I think you're proposing that as a friendly amendment. Procedurally, I'm not quite sure that we can do a friendly amendment to a motion that has been passed as opposed to one that is on the floor. But before I dig into that, I will see first whether Councillor Butler, whose motion it was, is interested in entertaining that as a proposed friendly amendment.
Could I ask, thank you, Your Worship, could I ask that Councillor McGrath just reiterate the wording? I want to be pretty clear on what the wording is, and then I probably have a question around the intent of it.
So the wording would be that council direct administration to follow public health guidelines, and when facilities may be considered to be reopened, the information be presented to council in a timely manner for planning to reopen. The intention is to assure our community that the word possibility in the previous motions means that we have all intentions on borrowing $200,000 to $300,000 or finding $200,000 to $300,000 in our reserves to allow our community, whenever it is operationally feasible, to enjoy recreation once again, that we want the same things as them.
Thank you. So I understand the intent to be to clarify what might be seen as somewhat ambiguous wording in last week's motion, where we referenced the possibility of these facilities being closed. And I understand that what you're proposing is that we make it clear that when it becomes possible to reopen facilities due to public health guidelines, that you want to assure the community that council will consider at least opening them at that point. Is that a fair assessment? It seems to me, Your Worship, that I have no objection to this. That's what we meant. That's what I believe was intended with the motion. I think that there's a great deal of awkwardness in attempting to amend a motion already passed. I'd suggest that Councillor McGrath's motion can stand alone. It can clarify. I leave that to you. I certainly have no objection. I want to point out that the intent of our motion was that when we're able to consider reopening facilities, we will do so. And we will look at financial modeling at that point. It doesn't mean we're going to open a facility immediately. We will attempt to do so in as cost effective and fiscally responsible a manner as possible. I would not want this to be interpreted as telling the community that, for example, the moment a public health restriction is lifted, that we will, without consideration of financial realities, that we will open it. But we will absolutely consider it. And there was no intent in our motion last week to suggest that these facilities would remain closed until the end of the year necessarily, notwithstanding a little bit of a narrative that is developed around town. That was never the intent of the motion. And I believe that's what Councillor McGrath is attempting to clarify. I'm fully in favor. Whether Your Worship, you wish to see it as an amendment, sort of retroactive, or a standalone motion for clarity, I leave to you as chair. Thank you. But I'm in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Well, it sounds like the ambiguity still remains. This sounds like it's just a bit of sugarcoating on a tough pill to swallow. There's still no commitment that we will open these. There's suggestion that we revisit the conversation, but the stark reality is, if we don't budget for opening, how can we borrow money for something that we planned not to open? There is no assurances that we will be able to find this money. Provincial, federal governments are giving money away to everybody in our country. If we don't budget for it, then I don't think we deserve it. There's no commitment to with this amendment. There's still no commitment to the individuals that have voiced their opinion. That honestly, again, back to, we are sugarcoating a pill that is very tough to swallow, and we shouldn't be doing that.
Councillor Keller-Granthey.
Within our budget, we had slated $1.1 million to put into our reserves. To do these cuts, we took $273,000 towards the cuts. Last week, we sat through a presentation with our auditor that says we have $400 million plus. We're in great shape for a municipality of our size. We have left $700,000 that is still going into our reserves. We all know we have money to restart. Not only that, last week we passed a motion for $2.7 million, 500,000 extra for our arena. We as a council had no problem saying we can go to a debenture for $500,000 for the improvement of our arena. So there is nothing stopping this council from saying we can still give our residents and non-residents a break, and we can start when we feel that it is safe to do so. We do have money.
All right, I think the order that I have is Councillor Demota, Councillor Butler, Councillor Wilson.
Not a response or rebuttal?
Oh, well,
No, I'm willing to wait on the rotation to late.
all right, go ahead then, Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Keller MP, that is great. If the money is there, and if you feel confident that the money is there, that we should put binding wording into Councillor Butler's motion. I would get behind that today. Binding wording suggesting that when we can open these services, we open them. We put the money towards it. We don't have the discussion. We don't have the conversation. We don't hum and haw over it. Take the ambiguity out, then yeah, let's do it. When we can open services, when the provincial government says that we can open these services, the daycare, the arena, the pool, let's do that. But honestly, what is still not there is the money for our bylaw services and the and operations. And so we're going to welcome visitors back, and to a community that's overgrown with grass and weeds, and they can't use the washrooms, and there's no bylaw services that enforce any of this. Like, let's put some money or put some strong wording towards committing money back to these essentials immediately once we're able to do so.
May I?
Well, yeah.
Everybody come back. I can come back and talk to.
Yes, I'm trying to keep an order here, and we have yet to have a motion on the floor in any event. But Councillor Demota, Councillor Butler, Councillor McGrath, Councillor Keller-Hempe, in that order.
To me, this just it feels like fear mongering, and if we need to find a couple of $1,000s to open up a public washroom, if there's a great demand to do so, we don't know what our forecast is going to be like. So we don't know if we're going to get a second wave, and there's no point in budgeting money that might not get used.
So
I'm
Demota, I do appreciate the intrusiveness of interrupting, but really let's take issues as they come before us. We started with an intent by Councillor McGrath to make a motion amending a previous motion. I cannot find authority in our procedure bylaw to make an amendment to a previously passed motion, but under section 11.15 of Schedule 2 of our procedure bylaw, it provides in emergent situations, I will accept that this is one, where previous notice to rescind or amend a motion previously adopted is not practical. I concede that it wasn't because it was only passed a week ago. A motion to rescind or amend a motion previously adopted shall require a 2/3 vote of councillors present at the council meeting at which the rescinding or amending motion is introduced. So I can certainly allow Councillor McGrath to make a motion to amend the previously adopted motion, but the rule that allows for that also requires a 2/3 vote of council. And by my math, that's 4 2/3. So somebody has to put 2 hands up, or at least one part way. We have to go with 5. So we need 5, and that's just the reality of the situation. I need confirmation, however, that no irrevocable action has been taken on the previous motion, because a motion to rescind or amend is out of order if irrevocable action has been taken on the original motion. So, Mr. Furcho, can you confirm whether or not any irrevocable action has been taken on the motion that was passed on May 5th?
Your worship, no irrevocable action has yet been taken, no.
Okay. So, Councillor McGrath, I return to you, and you are welcome to make a motion as you previously stated, which will be a motion to amend, now I've forgotten the number, but the motion from May 5th. Recognizing that in these circumstances, a slightly different threshold is required, that is a 2/3 vote. But if you wish to make that motion, then it'll be on the floor and then we can debate that.
Yes, and I'm also, to Councillor Butler's point, that this motion does have the ability to stand on its own versus being an amendment to the previous motion. My intention is to bring some level of certainty and assure our community that we are on your team and we are on your side and we want the same things that you want. The intention is that once public health guidelines have been directed, that we are soon to enter stage 3 and you may now swim in pools given social distancing and all of these other guidelines are able to be met, that our directors and our managers will come to us and they will demonstrate their ability to operate in the environment of the new guidelines. And once that is clear, with certainty that we can operate safely, which we have no idea what that looks like for these facilities today, but I want our community to know that once it is deemed safe and permissible to play hockey and to swim and to recreate in a fitness facility, that your council will absolutely see this through. We will have it presented to us, and I will commit myself personally to try my best to find the funds within our reserves, to find operating dollars to reopen and give our community back the opportunities for wellness and recreation that they know and love.
All right, I just want to confirm then that you're making that motion and not as a motion to amend the previous motion, but simply as a fresh motion to give that direction to administration. Yes, okay. Thank you. So I will accept that that is a motion which has been made and is now open to debate. Councillor Butler, I think you were next.
Yeah, thank you. My intent with commenting that could be a standalone motion was simply to recognize I didn't see whether it was possible to amend a motion, but Your Worship, you clarified that it is possible to amend the motion. And Councillor McGrath, if your intent is to amend my motion, I am open, and the question of whether it's a friendly amendment doesn't come into play because it's a motion already being that has been voted on already, but I consider it a friendly amendment, and I'm happy either way, Councillor McGrath, if you wish to propose it as an amendment. Now that we understand that's procedurally allowable, I'm open either way. I didn't mean to suggest that I wasn't open to an amendment.
It doesn't really matter to me how it has to come about. I just want to make sure that our community is understanding the intention of council right now.
And I just want to be clear that procedurally, there is a difference in the threshold that's required. It's only one vote, but it is a procedural difference. So be cognizant of that. Councillor Kelleher-MP and then Councillor Journeau.
I'm in favor of either an amendment or for it standalone. It's up to Councillor McGrath.
Thank you. Councillor Journeau.
I support a motion on its own. I think that we should stick with the original plan. It's being debated in the next item. but I think we should stick with the plan and make some amendments as we proceed. And I see this as a change. The events, we picked a date and we picked a number to make a plan. And I think we should stick with that and then come up with amendments as the events unfold before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. You can close debate and just confirm whether this is a standalone motion or intended to be so, or an amendment.
This is a standalone motion that council direct administration to follow public health guidelines, and when facilities may be considered to be reopened, the information be presented to council in a timely manner to plan for reopening.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, did you want to say something further before I call the question?
No, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. So it is a standalone motion, not motion to amend. Therefore, the regular majority rules apply. So I will call the question. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm assuming that you can all remember it and that staff have recorded it. So on the question or the motion from Councillor McGrath, all in favor? Opposed? There is one opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 8.1, which is Councillor Wilson's motion to rescind. So Councillor Wilson.
Well, following that last motion, I'm not sure how much legs this has, but honestly, I have two motions that I'd like to rescind. First being the council rescind motion. The motion passed on May 5th, 2020 to direct administration to make the cuts recommended by the Budget Review Committee to achieve a budget reduction of $982,000. And the other one, should have preceded the one that I just read, but the council rescind the motion passed on April 7th, 2020 to reduce municipal taxes by $982,000. I believe that these motions were made without sufficient information made public, highlighting where these cuts would come from and what impact they would have in our community. Council operated as the Budget Review Committee. We did meeting for 2 weeks before emerging with recommendations to be then voted upon. The public consultation was not adequately met. Yes, I would like to say that we did operate above board. We did make the decision to reduce taxes quite a long time ago. Public consultation was not met yet. We were very candid about the decisions we were making. Although the exceptional circumstances for further debate, I believe, are the substantial outcry that followed the May 5th council decision once recommendations were made public. I believe rescinding the motions today echoes the resounding response of the vocal majority, not the silent minority, that we have received from the public since unveiling the proposed budget cuts. I can only speak for the people that contact me, the people that write letters to us, the people that voice their opinion. I am definitely not in favor of suggesting that there's a silent majority out there that we are speaking for. These letters come from across our community, all demographics. A letter from Dave Nielsen, a man of 75 who visits the pool ritualistically every day. They come from small business owners that operate cafes, pay commercial rent. They come from restaurants that can't pay their $18,000 rent but they won't be able to pay their $17,000 rent either. And for the ability to have these services available when we can open them, to offer some type of maintenance to our town, to offer public washrooms for individuals that are coming through, visitors, maybe just travelers. Honestly, these letters come from commercial building owners. They come from young families. They come from sports organizations. They come from every aspect of the community. They came quickly. Some may say it's solicited. I don't think there's anything wrong with getting the word out there. People talked, and people talked quickly, and people shared their information, shared what they realized they were going to lose. Yet we push this forward and don't listen to the 27 people that have written. You know, if you do the ratio, if we had 100 people, honestly, 3 people may be against or maybe for the cuts. 97 wouldn't. And I think that ratio probably propagates into the rest of the community. I think that we should rescind these motions and go back to a 0% budget and have the flexibility to pivot, to move forward, to plan, and to operate when we operate. We need to support ourselves in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I have recorded hands up in this order: Councillor Demota, Councillor Journeau, and Councillor Keller-Harampi.
I appreciate all the feedback that we've got, and I did take all the letters into consideration, at least the ones that I got to prior to the weekend. And I appreciate all of the information that we're getting. And, you know, I do have to put some experience into play here. And when we've had situations like this in the past on previous councils, similar situations have occurred. And post that, you know, it still spoke to me that when during election time, I was still supported by people in the community. And when I say the silent majority, a lot of people that have reached out to me are supporting me. Sometimes they don't want to get caught into public debate, whether it's social media or voicing their opinions publicly. So, you know, I think that the 5 people that voted, I think when I looked at the stats from the election, that made up 52% of the votes from 15 candidates that ran. And I think that, you know, when you look at that, I think that we were elected to make decisions and speak on behalf of our community. And sometimes there is demographics that we may represent entirely or partially. But when I make my decisions, it's not to garner support for re-election. It's for my understanding, for my best knowledge, and my experience for the betterment of the community. And I still feel that decisions we made are sound for the information that we have at this time and what's available from our government, and how we can proceed forward soundly. So I think that we have the right information, and we're proceeding in the manner that we're best possible equipped with right now.
Thank you, Councillor Butler.
Thank you. I have a couple of points to raise. You know, Councillor Wilson, I appreciate your point that we have received an overwhelming majority of letters opposing, in some cases, the tax reduction, in some cases, the expense reductions, and in almost all cases, seeing the expense reductions as a result of the tax reductions. And I will reiterate that that is not the case. My problem is that so many of these letters are based on, frankly, a misunderstanding of the intent. One after another of these letters says that I'm opposed to this or that facility being closed until the end of the year. And we are not saying that. We have never said that. Councillor McGrath, and I thank you for that, has clarified again. The spirit of our decision is only one of responsible management. It would be irresponsible for us to say right now, even though Councillor Wilson is asking us to create clarity, say when we'll open the activity center. How can we say that? We don't know that. We have no crystal ball. Administration consistently suggested to us that they can't make workforce reductions as are required without knowing when we will reopen. But we don't know that. All we can do is commit to the community that we will plan as we go, and we will assess and consider and do our best to get these services back for the community when time allows. The City of Edmonton just said that all of their swimming facilities are going to be closed, are not going to open this summer. That's a reality. So we can't say when the pool will be open. All we can say is that it will be open as soon as we can, and we'll do it in a responsible manner. So many of these letters seem to be operating under a narrative that says, we've closed all of these services until the end of the year. And I wonder, Councillor Wilson, if you have any idea where those people are getting their information, because it's not from our motion. It is not from the information that we have provided to the community. I want to then make another point about another narrative, which is simply that if we reverse the tax reduction, we'd have all this money to provide these services. The spirit of the tax reduction was this: residents and businesses are not going to be able to afford to pay their taxes. We know that. That's very clear. That's why we've provided all of these deferrals, allowing people to pay their taxes if and when they're able to pay their taxes. So your suggestion that if we just reverse the tax cuts, that we would then have money in the bank that we could sort of use to have, remain on a ready to open footing, even though that we may not be able to open these facilities for months, is simply false. It's not true. The money isn't there. As Councillor Keller-Rampe has pointed out, we're going to have to borrow or dip into reserves. There's just no getting around that. The process of digging ourselves out of the hole that we're falling into with COVID is going to be a multi-year process. It's going to take us 3, 4, I don't know how many years it's going to take us to get out of this. And we're going to do it with taxes. There's nowhere else that money's going to come from. So we've chosen to give taxpayers a little bit of a break this year. They know that that's a 1-year one-off. They know their taxes are going to go up in future. They know that we have no other sort of trough to go to fund our operations. If higher levels of government come along and offer some relief to municipalities, as we all hope, well then great. We'll look at that, we'll consider, and we'll take appropriate actions. Your proposal, Mr. Wilson, is to not have a plan. It's a lick and a promise. It's, well, don't change anything. Operate the way we've been operating, hope for the best, and see what the future brings us. I'm afraid the council hasn't agreed with that, and they haven't agreed with that point of view from the first time you purported that really we should watch and wait and kind of not really change anything. I don't know what kind of a world people think you live in when you just carry on with the same old in the face of these massive interruptions to our economy. The economy of this town is going to go into a major recession, and it's going to take us years to get out of it. And yeah, we have to reduce expenses, tighten our belts, and we have to reopen the community in a forward-looking and a responsible manner, and not right now make commitments, oh, we're going to open this facility at this time or that time. We can't do that. You may have a crystal ball that you're satisfied with, Councillor Wilson, but I assure you I don't.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Journeau, and then Councillor Keller-Rampe.
Thank you. Very much respecting the comments that Councillor Butler and following up along the same lines. Councillor Wilson mentioned some resounding numbers. I think we have 20-some letters. But I also looked at social media, and on one posting, we have 62 that are supporting our position. So numbers are numbers. The bottom line is towns, municipalities spend too much money. And there was a tweet that said, this town receives millions of visitors, spends millions of dollars. Why is the town broke? Well, because we spend too much. It's time to keep thinking of reducing. To keep it in round numbers, our budget is $16 million. Taxation provides approximately half, $8 million. Out of that, $8 million, residents pay $2 million. Non-residents pay $6 million. The majority of their revenue comes from tourism. We've already been told that the tourism revenue for this year is going to be reduced. Therefore, their ability to pay may not be there. So consequently, it was chosen to reduce expenses by the municipality in order to come up with some semblance of a budget. We picked a number. We picked a date. We made a plan. It's not perfect, but I think we have to stick with the plan. We've always been open to the fact that we will reopen when COVID-19 pandemic is over. There's a pandemic amongst us, so let's just be calm, take a deep breath, and have a look at the big picture. And always be prepared for what brings us in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Keller-Hrampe?
I agree with what we've done. Since mid-March, Jasper experienced approximately 1,900 private sector layoffs, which equates to 17% of the workforce. Due to circumstances completely out of their control, businesses are facing unprecedented challenges just to survive, and individuals and families are experiencing extreme financial uncertainty and massive emotional strain. As council, we recognize that our community had entered an exceptionally uncertain period in our history, and that would be irresponsible to continue to operate business as usual. It was imperative for us to look at all sides of the municipal operation and make adjustments to ease the tax burden, save funds wherever possible, represent of the new economic landscape while maintaining a viable community infrastructure. Our decisions were made after much deliberation. They did not come easily. We recognize that layoffs and budget reductions come at a human toll, and this was certainly a large consideration in our decision-making process. We as a council, for many of those cuts, could not discuss them in public forum. They were human resources related. Therefore, they were in camera. We were asked by administration to come back with those cuts, and that's what we did. I stand over them. And I just want to talk, Councillor Wilson mentions bylaw and all of that, and I agree. But when bylaw are put in those positions, staffing and service levels are determined by community population and visitation levels. Starting summer population and visitor levels of 25,000 to 30,000 per day dictated the need for 3 bylaw officers and a seasonal summer officer. Based on the input from hotels, Tourism Jasper, Via Rail, and several other sources, our current projections show 70 to 80% drop in visitation through summer season, which simply could not justify us to keep the levels of service that we had. This past winter, with normal visitations, levels are in line with what we expect this summer. Our municipality had 1 bylaw officer from November to February, and things ran smoothly. Safety of our town. It is important to note that RCMP staffing levels have remained consistent, and safety of our community is not in jeopardy. So I think that as a community, we will have cuts. We will reopen when we can open. The other issue I'd like to address from all these letters is the arena. Our arena is closed right now because of Alberta Health Services closed it. Last December, we passed a motion to complete capital program. Last week, I made a $2.7 million project to happen. We chose, while the arena is closed to Alberta Health Services, that it is now a good time to carry out that project. At that meeting, administration said the arena may be open, could be opened mid-October. And if it is, we'll give it the green light, because the one thing and one facility in our whole complex of facility that actually maintains itself is the arena. So there is absolutely no reason. Now, I do have an issue. I have heard back from several people that they received a letter, a copy of our motion from administration that went out to a number of people with minor sports that said that the arena was being closed because of our cuts, which we know is untrue. And we need to make that publicly known. The arena is closed because Alberta Health Services has closed it. We as a council, for the betterment to get the work done now, have gone ahead with that project. And as we made the amendment earlier, we never said that we would totally keep it closed till January. We were asked by administration that they needed dates to say when we can reopen. And as a council, we picked that date. We don't have a magic ball. So I think we need to get that clearly out there. The cuts, the service cuts, has nothing to do with the arena.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Herente. I'm going to go to Councillor McGrath, and then I want to raise a point of procedure, and then I was hoping that I could allow, well, I wish to speak, and then I was going to allow Councillor Wilson to close, but Councillor Demota, you indicated you wish to speak again on the motion. We're about third in line right now, but you're trying to make a point of order?
Yeah, and I wanted to know how you wanted to address this, and it's because it's still new to us, and it involves our platform, because there are some questions coming in via the chat, and then there's a Q&A section, which a question has come in, and I don't know whether procedurally how you want to address that, and I apologize for interrupting. It's because the questions are coming in the middle of the debate, and I don't know where or how or like what's the proper process here, because I don't want people to feel that they're ignored. Sorry.
I addressed that earlier in the meeting and said that I would return to it, and I will. And I will let Councillor McGrath speak first. Then I will deal with that in my comments, and then I will allow Councillor Wilson to close debate.
Thank you. For those of you in the public that were present at last meeting, I apologize, as this is going to sound repetitive, but I want to make sure that these words are clearly understood. Firstly, thank you for the time and energy that your council has put into these reductions of expenses. You have a very dedicated council who has fortunately been able to work through these numbers that were given to us and the task that was given to us to move through. It's certainly not in a normal realm of council work to be adjusting multi-million-dollar figures. I believe that we are all a group of people who were elected to be the voice of our community, and we never imagined that we would be sifting through departmental challenges and reductions because of an infection that has closed the entire world. So while this is so difficult and has affected us so deeply over the past 9 weeks, we are here today because of an infection, COVID-19, not because of council making rash decisions, not because council wants to see our valued staff people at home, and not because council wants to see our amazing services not being utilized by the community. Likely, we will have made mistakes. We're open to that. We recognize that this is an ever-changing situation, and we have to keep our pulse, our finger on the pulse of the community. There is no solution that is black or white. There's so many things that we're going to have to reassess as we go, probably week to week. The job of being a counselor has never been so full on. I have spent all of my waking hours for the past 9 weeks considering all of these decisions very deeply, and I can tell you that my whole family feels this very dramatically during this time. We all have the same goals, and we all want the same things for our town. We are all on the same page. How we get there is challenging, but we want our residents to know that we support you and we're with you. The amount of revenues lost from closures are a realistic explanation of why expenses need to be reduced. We as council and I as an individual have a personal legal responsibility to be fiscally responsible. The daycare has not been affected by council's decisions to reduce expenses. May I repeat, the daycare has not been affected by council's decisions to reduce expenses. We value the high caliber childcare and provincially outstanding achievements our center is rooted in. We recognize the need for childcare in a recovery phase and encourage the childcare services manager to come to us to discuss operating safely in our center when she is comfortable that we have everything in place to resume operation. The Aquatic and Fitness Center expenses have been reduced by council by approximately $155,000. We value and recognize the importance of fitness and aquatics for individual and family well-being. We are also wanting for you to once again recreate in your beautiful community spaces. The arena is vital to both our economy and our children and our own well-being. When the capital project is complete, we too want you to enjoy getting back on the ice. The activity center was reduced by approximately $15,000. These dollar values that have been removed by decreasing expenditures can be found within our reserves to resume operation. It was suggested to me by a community member to consider re-election and to consider the dramatic increase that could happen next year. And I just want our community to know, as I finish my statements, that I have not for once in the last 9 weeks thought about my own personal situation and my own reputation in this community. That is not why I'm here. And that is not why any of us are here. For my own popularity contest, we have a legal responsibility to make sound and safe decisions for the financial ability of our community to get through this really challenging time. So I want everyone to understand how difficult this role of being a counselor and being a decision maker in any level of government has been. So please pass forward kindness and pass forward gratitude and show your whole community what we can do together. I have amazing ideas to bring forward to communities in bloom. There's so much that we can do if we act as one and if we unite through these really difficult times versus being challenged by one another and brought to a place that's just uncomfortable for all. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. As I indicated, I want to enter into the debate, and then I will deal with a procedural matter, and depending on how council perceives that, I would then invite Councillor Wilson to close debate. With respect to the debate, I hope that my position has been sufficiently articulated since the beginning of this, and that is that I am not opposed to cutting spending. I think it is responsible and incumbent on us to save money. When facilities are closed, we should not be spending money on staff who work there. We have to take responsible decisions to cut spending. My opposition has been not with respect to spending, but with respect to cutting the budget. That is for two reasons. I maintain that it continues to be premature. Our initial motion on April 7th was a shot in the dark. We don't know much about the future. As has been said, nobody has a crystal ball. Councillor Demoda opened up debate saying that he felt that the decision made by council was sound for the information we have at this time. That may be so, but it seems to me that we will never know less than we know today. We will only learn more as we go along. So my position has always been, go with a 0% budget, defer it as we have already done, come back to this question in the fall, or even later if we choose. When we have some actual figures, we will see how the recovery is developing. We will see what ability our taxpayers have to pay. At that time, we can borrow the money that we need, and we will then have a clearer idea what that amount is. If necessary, we can, at that time, I think, forgive taxes. So we have to get a tax bill out. I recognize that. We can itemize what those taxes will be and say, but you don't have to pay them. And we'll come back and look, and if things turn out one way or the other, but based on information that will be real, we can decide to forgive a portion of those taxes. In the meantime, what we preserve is the budget, because I think, and I have argued this from the outset, that the hole we dig in terms of trying to recover from what appears to be a 12% reduction, but is, I think, probably closer to 20, because we were at one point looking at an increase. Now, I agree, it started at about 5, but we whittled that down to just over 2, and then we kind of flirted with 0, and then we went to -12. We have recognized that our operation has been under-resourced, and there are other factors that habitually increase the budget year after year. So now we're going to be in a hole where we have to make up the 12 that we're cutting. We'll have to make up the 2 to 5 that we decided to forgo this year. There will be additional increases. Remember that what's coming from the province is an obligation to pay for policing in our community. So there's going to be another budget increase. We are going to be looking at, I think, massive budget increases, which are really going to hamper our ability to dig ourselves out of a hole that we're creating. So I think, and I've argued this, and I will end now, but I think this is not the time. There is a time for action, of course. This is a time for contemplation, and wait until we have better information, come back and visit this issue at a later time. And so I'm not opposed at all to making the cuts to the spending. I am opposed to making the budget cut at this time. So I support the rescission, but of course, if we were to rescind, then we would have to have a brand new motion to figure out something, because we do need a tax bylaw. But again, I reiterate, I'm not opposed to the cuts. I'm not opposed. In fact, I agree that we have to cut spending. I just don't like the idea of cutting the budget when we are so blind. And we will, our vision will improve over time, is my view. The procedural matter that I wanted to raise is the question of any response from the Galleria. Had we been sitting in chambers physically, as I indicated earlier in the meeting, and people wanted to speak, I would turn to council and seek concurrence from council. I have been watching. There has been only one hand up, and that hand has been up since Ms. Cleaver gave her presentation. And so I am not inundated by people waving their hand, but that has always been the rule. I appreciate it that other people are chatting, but that's something that would not happen in council chambers because we don't allow chattering. So I would be quite content to invite the one person who has had a hand up for now, I presume a couple of hours, to address council if they wish on this issue, if they still have that desire. But I leave that decision to council. If you would like me to invite that one person, I will do that. That person can speak to this issue. I will not accept others because nobody has taken the initiative to put their hand up, so we can control it in that way. And then I would turn the floor to Councillor Wilson to close debate, and then I will call the question. So do I have concurrence from council to allow that one participant who has signified a desire to address council at this time? Nods. I see nods or thumbs up all around. All right. And fortunately, that participant has a name ascribed, not just a telephone number. So Tamara Couture, if you are still there, and if Mr. Fertshow can promote you and unmute you, you are welcome to address council at this time.
Hello.
Hello.
Ah.
I believe that we can hear you if you wish to go. All right, as we wait for Ms. Couture, Councillor Demota, you had a point of order.
I was just wondering when I was looking at the agenda here, I'm not sure how procedurally this works, but do we not need a waiver of we're going to go that's before us? I don't know if it's because it's already been addressed, but I don't want to impede progress here or anything like that, but I just procedurally, I just wanted to make a point.
If you wish, to address that, we can have a motion to waive notice. I suppose technically it may be necessary. The bylaw does not specifically say that. It says a councillor may introduce a motion calling on council to rescind a motion. It doesn't require a notice period. So
I'm going to let it go. I just
okay.
Questioning.
Thank you. I will move on unless Ms. Couture can say that she is available to address. It has been a very long time that her hand has been up, and she may have, although she's still subscribed to the meeting. So
I can't get my microphone to work.
yes, you can. You
Hello,
have.
can you hear me?
We can.
Does it work? Okay.
Yeah.
My concern in regards to these cutbacks, and it's not that I'm against the cutbacks, it's the fact that we haven't been shown what the savings will amount to for the taxpayers. And for me is the taxpayer looking towards the future, because I know in the future taxes will have to go up to offset anything that has been decided by the council at the present time. And then my other concern was, and Councillor McGrath brought it up, is the communication I know that you guys put it on your website. Unfortunately, it just doesn't seem to come across to the community in a timely manner, or it's just not seen. And so when these decreases came in, and the wording just wasn't clear enough for the community perhaps to totally understand what was going on.
All right, thank you for those comments. I can tell you, I think with a degree of certainty that we cannot tell you what the precise reduction will be of any individual's taxes. Administration needs to know the budget so they can prepare a tax bylaw. But that then depends on the particular services that are to be reduced, because not everybody pays equally for the same services. So we have out of town properties that are taxed at a different rate. And it's quite a complex calculation, and they need all the numbers to move forward. And it will also depend, at least potentially, on changes in assessed value of any particular property, because that will change your tax amount. So, I mean, you can, if you choose, just apply, excuse me, 12% to your bill, but I cannot say that that would be an accurate reflection of anything. And until we have a tax bylaw, nobody is going to know that. So while I appreciate the question, we and administration are not today in a position to tell you precisely what those numbers will be. With respect to the question of communications, your point is noted, and we thank you for that. So thank you for keeping your hand up for such a long time, although in the virtual world, I guess that was not too taxing. But thank you for your interest and your comments. So I will go then to Councillor Wilson to close debate.
Councillor Kalarpi, are you okay with that? I saw your hand up.
Just, I had a couple of texts to say that Mr. Dennis Safino said he had his hand up for quite some time.
Oh, well, if that is the case, it is. Well, I see it now. I did not, the hands I thought jumped to the top of the page when they came up. So when I last checked, and it was, there was just one. But again, if council is prepared, I can invite Mr. Safino, but at some point, I think that we cannot wait until all 115 have had an opportunity. This is not a town hall meeting. This is a council meeting, and we have to exercise some control. But again, I will put the question to council as I put with respect to the last speaker. Is there any objection to hearing from Mr. Safino? I see no objection. So again, Mr. Furcho, if you could add Mr. Safino.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you very much, all of you, council, mayor, your worship. I understand this has been a very difficult process, and again, I think I've reiterated this point to all of you in the past. It's probably, when you got elected to this position, you probably never thought you'd be making these tough decisions in your term, or certainly in this term, or any term. So thanks again for all of that. Yes, this is a polarizing topic for sure. You knew it was going to be. I want to give a definition of a budget, okay? A budget is an estimate of income and expenditure for a set period of time. So when you're passing your budget, and everybody, I believe everybody, including administration, agrees income is going to be affected. To what extent, we don't know. So it's a budget of, now we know that a municipality is not allowed to run a deficit. So then if we all agree that income is going to be down 10, 20, 30, 40%, then your expenses have to do the same to meet your mandated on the MGA for not running a deficit. So where, if that's your mandate, and your income we know is going to be dropped by that amount, then we have to drop expenses by that amount. So we all know that. So even that, having said that, a week or two ago, administration said council has to make a decision in order to get tax notices out. And I believe that it was said that it had to be done that day. Here we are, you guys are still talking about it. So it didn't have to be done that day, because apparently we can still, I don't know what the drop dead date was, but I was led to believe that that was the drop dead date. So I guess those are points that, unfortunately I didn't have anything prepared to speak today, because I wasn't, this kind of was sprung this morning that, people were allowed to present. But, the reality is the town is going to be affected. It is going to be affected. I've got commercial tenants, I have residential tenants saying they can't pay their rent. So their rent, they can't pay their taxes. So does that mean then landlords are going to have to pay them or defer them, or somewhere along the way, we're all going to have to pay this? And so are we all prepared then to just to keep paying our, $25,000, $30,000 per tax per building? And I just don't understand where the money's going to come from. So anyway, those are the points. And again, thank you very much. You guys have very, very difficult decisions to make. But there you go. I mean, you guys have all touched on when we reopen, that yes, we could go into reserves to get this thing moving again, and that is the right way to go, I believe. Let's just see how things reopen. When Alberta Health Services says that we are in a position to reopen. We talk about the arena. Well, my understanding there was too. It's a 5-month project. Well, I don't see anything for a development permit being pulled yet, building permit. Knowing what Parks Canada is dealing with and what they've sent out in their communication, it's going to take 2 weeks to a month to get those processes started and get results. So that puts us into then, July. So July, August, October, November. So at the very best, we're talking the arena could be open mid to late November. So we're talking about a month that you guys have said they're going to close till the end of December. And if we believe it's going to be a 5-month project from start to finish, well, that'll be the first. So, the first time that's a time that would come in on time, and hopefully, fingers crossed, on budget. So really, what are we talking about? 4, 5 weeks, maybe not, for the arena. So it just seems like you guys are, anyway, that's my opinion. And I believe I'm speaking for a few people, but you guys, thanks again, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Mr. Safino. I'm not aware of other hands up. There's nothing appears on my screen, but not to say that that is infallible. I will then return to Councillor Wilson. You can close debate on this motion, and I will then call the question.
Well, it won't be long. I guess I would just like to note that I was a bit offended when Rico was running through everybody's qualifications coming up and qualifications of each councillor. And for some reason, I guess myself and Mayor Ireland were left out. But if I were to build a resume for Mayor Ireland, it would be many, many pages long, not just a brief snippet of what we've all done. I would have liked to close with his words, and I think it's a bit, it was a little while ago, but I would like, the way Mayor Ireland has numerously explained it to myself and the rest of council, I'm in full support of his words being the words that close debate. And I know sorry, I'm a bit speechless, but so we're going to leave Mayor Ireland's as closing. I hope everybody has respect for that, and let's call the question. Get over it.
All right, so I guess from a technical perspective, the motion, as I read it, is a motion to rescind two previous motions. Is there a desire from any councillor to split the motion so that we vote on each one separately? I see no, I'm sorry, Councillor Wilson?
I would suggest the first motion to be voted on would be the Budget Review Committee recommendation. You know, might as well split them. It's just.
Well, it's your motion, and I'm certainly prepared to do that. And now I'm sorry, I can't.
It doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Let's vote on together. It seemed like that was supported. The rest of the council supported it.
All right, and I will leave it to staff to fill in the motion numbers because I have lost track of them. But the motion is to rescind the April 7 motion of council to reduce the budget amount from, I think, 707,982,000 to 7 million on the tax levy. And the motion is to rescind the May 5th motion of council, which I think I can give a number to. It was motion number 134. So that is the motion before council to rescind those two previous motions of council. All in favor? Opposed? That motion is defeated. All right, thank you all, and thanks to the public. That was quite a learning experience. Agenda item 8.2, notice of appointments to Regional Assessments Review Board. Who do we have to speak to that motion?
I'll take this one, Your Worship, if I may.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. So this is for our assessment review board. So the formal process where residents or commercial owners can appeal their assessment. And we reviewed that bylaw and legislation a few years ago. And we are partnering with our neighboring communities and have a regional assessment review board, which requires that a designated clerk and a designated chair be appointed annually. And so the names are before you for those appointments. An important thing to note is that Michelle Deschaines is still our local assessment review board clerk. So she handles all the complaints and the associated paperwork locally. And she is appointed for a 3-year term, which matches the training requirements and all that. So Michelle is already appointed and that remains. What's before you today is for the regional side of it for the designated clerk and designated chair. Thanks.
Thank you. This is just by way of notice for today. Ms. Nadon?
Just one moment. I believe it is, but Yes, it is, with additional discussion if required on next week and final decision on the 26th. I don't think there's a rush to get this through in terms of the assessment appeal deadlines have been modified by the province till July 1st anyway. But yeah, that is the way the report is presented for notice today, decision in 2 weeks, but I don't foresee any changes if council wanted to move ahead, but that's the way the report reads.
Thank you. We can move then to, I'm sorry, Councillor Butler.
Thank you. I know this will come back and it doesn't need to be really discussed today, but Ms. Nadon, you're recommending that we appoint Mr. Eldred as a member of the Logs and Carbs. There is just one name, so I think I understand by that, but there are already some other names that are simply rolling over because do we appoint them for a 3-year term? That's the part I'm just not clear on, why that one name is being appointed as a member, but no other names are brought up. So if you could just clarify that for me.
For sure. Thanks for the question. My apologies for skipping that part. So the second and third motions that are there speak to the designated clerk and designated chair. I believe Mr. Eldred, when we appointed several members a few years ago, right around the time when we redid that bylaw. And I think we had staggered the appointments to avoid everyone expiring at the same time. And that's why Mr. Eldred is coming up now. And so essentially the other part of that process is that each community must appoint members to participate in the regional board. So that would be our local member that's appointed to the regional board. So Mr. Eldred could be called upon to sit on hearings for the town of Hinton or town of Edson. And similarly, other members from other communities would come to our community to hear appeals.
But to be clear, I think we ourselves as Jasper still have 3 appointed board members. It's only that one of them is up for renewal at this point. Am I correct in that we still have 3 local board members to contribute to the regional board?
The others are still appointed, just their term hasn't expired.
Right. That's what I meant to clarify. So thank you.
No problem. Thanks.
All right, so that will come back for further discussion if necessary on May 19th, and it will be back for a decision on May 26th. That takes us to agenda item 9, correspondence for information, consideration, or action. All of that related to a previous agenda item. So I think that we can move beyond that. I just wanted to make one generalized comment, that is to acknowledge and appreciate the effort of citizens to engage with us. We do have, as was pointed out earlier, a community engagement policy, and we invite, if not solicit, comments from the public, and we think that our service is enhanced when we have community engagement, and we should do all we can, I think, to encourage community engagement. I just wanted to observe that from my perspective, it is perhaps dangerous, or at least counterproductive, to, on the one hand, invite community engagement, on the other hand, to say that you may be more swayed by those who don't engage and remain silent. I mean, it's just a very difficult position to be in, but I do want to acknowledge those who have taken the effort to write to council and to engage with us, and I hope that that trend continues. Agenda item 10, new business. I regret to admit that I have an item for new business that I forgot entirely to add, but I think I can squeeze it in here. A week ago, we, by motion, established the creation of the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Task Force, but through my oversight, I forgot to include something to have council appoint a representative and an alternate to that task force. So we have established it, but we've established it in the absence of an appointment. And I intended to bring that back for today's meeting. And once again, I forgot to do what I was supposed to do. But I remembered now, so I would like to raise it as new business and offer an opportunity for council to appoint a representative and an alternate to the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Task Force. Councillor Demota.
I appreciate that this is coming back to council, and I was quite excited to finally be appointed to the Jasper Partnership Initiative, and then I think a lot of this work is going to take over the time on that. And seeing as that, you know, I was the appointee and you were the alternate, I would be in favor of council appointing you, seeing as that you instigated the direction for this and initiated. So I would be more than happy to support you. And if it's the will of council, I would like to submit myself to be your alternate if need be.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Certainly, I do have an abiding interest in it, and I'm quite prepared to serve in that capacity if that is the will of council. Is there any objection to that? All right, Councillor Demota, I will take that as a motion from you for the appointment of the representative, being myself and you as the alternate. If there is no debate, I will put the question. I'm sorry, Councillor Butler.
Thanks. Just a query. If we deliberately left terms of reference fairly open and membership fairly open for the task force to sort out for themselves, but is it across the board understanding that there will be one representative from each of the organizations that are represented, or has that been discussed? Is there the possibility of more than one, or what is the intent there? And I'm only querying this because what we're appointing here is one member and one alternate. I sort of thought we might have two members, but I'm just wondering what the discussion was around that at the table.
The purpose statement that council adopted was accepted by the initial group with the proviso that additional members could be added to the task force itself. But my recollection, and Ms. Nadon, you can confirm, I don't have that purpose statement in front of me, but I think that what we adopted as council was that scenario that each agency or group that is a member would be represented by one representative and one alternate. So that was in the initial terms that we approved.
Sure, good. Thank you for clarifying that.
Councillor McGrath?
I am also curious, Mayor Ireland, if the task force has had any discussions about the small businesses that would not be represented by Tourism Jasper or the Chamber of Commerce. I know many operators of, say, tour companies and many operators of small retail stores that are independently owned are not represented at the table. And I'm curious how the task force could potentially choose someone to represent the businesses that are neither represented by the Chamber or Tourism Jasper.
I appreciate the question, and it is a matter that was discussed at the initial meeting of the task force, and I'm confident will be raised again. And it is a bit of a thorny issue to decide who represents a group that doesn't actually exist. I mean, it exists in a broad sense, but that is a challenge, and so that debate goes on. It commenced, or I should say discussion rather than debate, but that discussion has been initiated. I see that there are still some emails going back and forth. We try and work through who would be an appropriate representative of particular sectors. So an open question still, but significant, and we will deal with it. Councillor Demota, did I see your hand up?
I'm good. That got answered. I appreciate.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anything else? I will then call the question with respect to the appointment of the representative and the alternate to the Economic Recovery Task Force. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you. Councillor reports. Councillor McGrath.
Last week, I attended the community conversation for COVID-19 in Jasper specific from 1 o'clock until 2 o'clock. And tomorrow I should be in attendance after a medical appointment in Hinton as well. Also to bring it to council's attention on, I hope I'm getting the date right, on May 28th, the Jasper Community Team Society will be holding their annual general meeting and electing a new board. So if anyone's interested in serving the community with the Jasper Community Team Society, please feel free to contact me and I can ensure that you get the link to the meeting.
Thank you. Any other councillor reports? Councillor Demota?
I just put some symptoms in here on an online doctor thing. I think I've developed an ulcer over this meeting today. So I just thought I'd report that. Needed to add some levity to the end of the meeting. So I appreciate all that we talked about today. And I'm sorry that if I left the mayor and Scott out in my little diatribe there, I was just speaking in people that voted in favor of that particular motion. So we all know your credentials and are very proud of you serving on council. Thank you.
Right, thank you. This is perhaps a bit redundant, but I will confirm that since our last meeting, I attended the first official meeting of the Economic Recovery Task Force last week. On Friday, I had a conference call with the Minister of Health, Mayor of Banff, Karen Sorensen, and I discussed, as I said, the definition of domestic non-essential travel at some length. Yesterday, Mayor Sorensen and I had a similar conference call with Minister Tanya Furr, who is responsible for tourism, and we're expecting some provincial announcement today, but so far as I have been able to see, that hasn't come through yet, but I might be. And that is my report. If there are no further reports, we have community conversations tomorrow at 1 o'clock on the Zoom network. And Councillor Butler, you had asked that we add agenda item 13, an in-camera matter, which you pretended to promise would be brief, and I'm sure your remarks will be. I will invite someone to make a motion at 12:56 that we move in camera. Councillor Keller-Hempe, you're making that motion. All in favor that we move in camera at this time? Any opposed? There are none opposed. That is carried. Before we resume in an in-camera session, Mr. Furcho, you can send us a note, or do we have a note for one? If
I haven't set one up yet, I'll do that right away. I can't do it while this one's on. So
yes, fair enough. And for the comfort and convenience of council, this is an appropriate time to take a break. When we have been here for it's 1 o'clock, 3.5 hours. I know that Councillor Butler, you indicated this would be brief, and so if we can get it over and done with, that would be great. So what sort of a break would be appropriate for council right now? 5 minutes? Is that what that hand up means? 5 minutes? All right, so 5 minutes or as soon thereafter as Mr. Furcho can make the technical switch over for us, and then we will reconvene, and after which we will revert quickly to open meeting so we can adjourn under the public eye as is required. All right, thank you all. We will reconvene in 5 minutes or so. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for tuning in today.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Hope it
everybody.
was